Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 124. So glad you could join me. Happy holidays to everybody out there this day after Christmas. Hope you had a good one, however you celebrate. Now, as always, Rattle's a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do too. So please do make sure you click the like button and share and all that good stuff to make sure poetry spreads around the internet. Today's guest is José A. Alcántara, and he'll be with us in about 15 minutes. But before we begin, it's always nice to go to the poet of the day. And today's poem is Breaking Point by Emily Pickering. Let's call up Emily.
Hello.
Hey, Emily, this is Tim, and you are live on the air with Rattle. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very good, Tim. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you too. So the poem that you wrote for this week, "Breaking Point," is about the holidays and the coronavirus. Some weeks, I pick a poem, that's a strange story or interesting, something that nobody's writing about. But this was a kind of poem that a lot of submissions were it felt like trying to capture. Just this feeling of the holidays with this still going on. So do you want to talk a little bit about what inspired the poem and how it came to be written?
Yes, I would love to. So I had told myself I was done writing COVID poems because I think a lot of poets have just written so much about this. But I agree with you. We were saying capturing this feeling because I noticed just such an awareness and a juxtaposition between celebrating the holidays and identifying how cautious should we be? How much is appropriate to complain when I know all my family members are thankfully in good shape? And so writing this poem, I was again trying to pinpoint that exact feeling of our second COVID Christmas when many people are able to be vaccinated, but at the same time, we have this new variant. And to what extent should that affect us? And to what extent can we still gather to celebrate while also being definitely frustrated with the way things are going right now?
Yeah, and what stands out in the poem are the various images that you put together, but with the tree falling over and then the Santa that you see. Did all that stuff actually happen? And when did you start writing the poem, and what was like the impetus for it?
Yeah, so our tree actually did fall over one day, and that struck me as so appropriate for the mood that I think we've all been in, just kind of just giving out. And I have to say, it was really strange to come home and just see your Christmas tree laying on the ground. That's not something that we really expect to see. And so there wasn't really much we could do other than move on and try and take care of it the best we could, which I think is representative of how everyone's feeling this holiday season. And the Masked Santa Claus, I did see that in the mall, and I remember that was just so striking to me because that's not what you expect to see, especially since I know my sister, who's very young, was looking forward to sitting on Santa's lap, telling him about the gifts she wanted to get. And so the fact that she, had to be spaced away from him, they were both wearing masks, that was just sort of eerie and a really powerful picture of all these memories being altered by COVID and the way so many events have already had to adapt. So I was just trying to think of a collection of images that I've been seeing over this whole month, really, but especially in the last week, and trying to put them together and identify all of these feelings that I think connect all of them, the tree and the Santa Claus, and just the conversations that I've had with family and friends while we're looking at Christmas cards, which usually say what types of things are going on in people's lives. But this year it felt more of, we're very thankful. This is what we're thankful for, which was a nice aspect of it when compared with the more eerie images of seeing the Santa Claus and seeing the tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to sort of keep things normal and together when it's the second Christmas in a row. Of this kind of this kind of world we're living in. Do you want to go ahead and read the poem?
Yes, I would love to. So this is Breaking Point. Our tree fell yesterday when no one was home. It just took one last breath and keeled down, pine shuddering and glass baubles dropping with the hollow sigh of defeat. I was out shopping with my sister, and we passed a masked Santa Claus in the mall, children banished to a forlorn chair adjacent to the lap they longed to sit on. At first, it was easy to describe how disease infiltrates a body, creeps below the radar like a wild dog tracing fence lines. Even then, we spoke only about our strength, because grief on an unfamiliar person bares teeth like a scarlet letter. I remembered when we were all butterflies, a brush of knuckles could rip wings, too fragile to embrace alive. Now we are all fountains buried in heaps of coins, people tossing fists of flashy wishes at each other with a concerted jonesing for relief. How gently our heed slips out of our hands, how gently a girl's vigilance can be worn down to the bone. The two-dimensional faces of distant relatives and college friends grace our Christmas cards. Typical reunions canceled while we assess the proper amount of fear, using an eyedropper to parse out the quota of griping over these particular griefs. We will later give way to a collective exclamation, unveiling former emotional recessions. I could swear even the summer sunflowers open late. Yes, our tree fell yesterday and we swept the fallen ornaments into the trash, aren't they all replaceable at the end of the day, and brushed out the branches until they unfurled from a fist to an open palm.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. It was Breaking Point. There's so many great lines in that poem. How gently our heed slips out of our hands is one of them that sort of stuck with me. And I learned a word too, desquamation.
It's a very medical word, and I remember thinking, I don't know if this is appropriate to put in the poem, but then I thought with all of the doctor's appointments that I'm sure we've all been going to and all of the testing and stuff, it really felt appropriate to sort of illustrate that unveiling that we're all doing right now. So,
yeah, well,
I heard
it's
that
perfect. Yeah, we kind of have a rule of thumb. If there's one new word, then that's a learning experience. If there's two, it's too much. So that's perfect.
Yes. Completely agree.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for joining us, Emily. It's great talking to you, and thanks for sharing this poem, which you can already see is resonating with a lot of people today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
It was Emily Pickering with today's poem, Breaking Point. And now we're going to go, let's look at about 5 minutes till we're going to join Jose. So let's look at some other poems from the past. And, this is a week where we tend to do sort of year-end reviews and that kind of thing. And let's look at some poems. For a while we were publishing Doggerel. And we had a little bit of a Doggerel contest because nobody wants the Christmas poem, frankly, as a daily poem, because that's the least trafficked day of the year at Rattle.com. And so we had a Doggerel contest for a while, which I kind of forgot about, honestly. But let's play one of these, the Night Before Christmas 2014 political Doggerel version by Russell Cover. Let's play this.
The Night Before Christmas, 2014, political version. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring. Nothing new about that. Nominations and bills were hung up in committee with no hope, for ideologues show no pity. New senators, too, were home tucked up in bed, dreaming of wall maps in all shades of red. And voters who slept through the midterm election were wrapped in thin blankets of sad disaffection. While out in the world there continued such clatter, it was hard to decide where to look for the matter. Ebola, Crimea, Boko Haram, Gaza's on fire, 370's gone. ISIS brutality boggles the mind, while CIA torture has tarnished our shine. The Arctic is darkening. Amplification enlarges the specter of Earth's degradation. Ferguson streets are lit up with contention, for race is a subject we've found hard to mention. Yet on the ellipse, in the dark of the night, kid-programmed Christmas trees sparkled with light. And what to our wondering eyes did appear but the POTUS equipped with executive gear? Standing alone as the head of the nation, he took one bold step to repair immigration. With a swish of his pen, he opened up Cuba and then disappeared to the land of the hula. But I heard him exclaim, as he left for his fun, "Merry Christmas to all. Now let's get something done."
Again, that was Russell Cover with her poem from December 5th, 2014. So that's 7 years ago, and doesn't it feel like a different world? And this was in response to the White House holiday poem basement version, which was going around the internet. What was that? I vaguely remember that. Let me see what this was. This was oops, I guess I can't see it. You have to sign in. I mean, it was a holiday poem that the White House put out. It feels like a different world in 2014 with Obama in the White House and the problems not quite pandemic level. So that was the Night Before Christmas 2014. And let's look at one more poem. This is a poem from 2000. was this one? This was 2015, the next year. And this was December 27th. This is more of a New Year's poem, because New Year's Eve is, of course, coming up as well. And here's a toast from Wendy Vitalock, which I'll read myself because there's no audio. A toast. Here's to the mountain, here's to the sky, here's to the who and the what and the why. Here's to the leisure, here's to the chore, here's to the pit and the skin and the core. Here's to the ancient, here's to the now, here's to the numb and the seed and the plow. Here's to the fire, here's to the shore, here's to the star and the freak and the bore. Here's to the attic, here's to the saint, here's to the song and the hum of complaint. Here's to the miner, here's to the crone, here's to the ruined, the stayed, and the flown. Here's to the wrist, here's to the tongue, here's to the rib, and the cage, and the bone. That is Wendy Vitalock, who's on Rattlecast number, I'm going to say like 50 or so. And then she says, immersed as we are in the season of gratitude, spirits, and imbibing, it seemed only fitting to write a toast. And so that was Wendy's toast from 2015, and yet another time that feels like a different era, doesn't it? So now let's go to take a quick break. We're going to join our today's guest, which is José A. Alcántara, and we'll be right back. And we're back. Thanks for waiting. As I mentioned, José A. Alcántara is our guest today. He lives in western Colorado, although he joins us from Arizona right now. He's worked as a bookseller, mailman, commercial fisherman, banker, carpenter, studio photographer, door-to-door salesman, and math teacher. His poems have appeared in Poetry Daily, The Southern Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, Spillway, Rattle, RHINO, etc. He's been in the anthology 99 Poems for the 99%. In America, We Call Your Name, Poems of Resistance and Resilience. His first book, The Bitten World, is just out from Tebot Bach. And here he is now, José A. Alcántara. Hey, Jose, how you doing today?
Doing well, Tim. It's good to see you. Thanks for hosting this and all the other stuff you do for poetry, which seems limitless, but...
Yeah, well, it's always my pleasure. I mean, these broadcasts are just my favorite thing of all the things that we do. I love that I finally get to meet the poets that I've been appreciating their work for so long, and you're one of them. Like, you're one of those sort of, I don't know, like mystery poets where I wonder, like why it took so long to get a first book out, and because you have so many great poems and are so sort of beloved among the poetry community. So it's great to finally get to see you, and I'm so glad that you got this book out, which I know we've been waiting for a long time.
Yes, it has been a long time. I think most of the poems are at least 4 to 5 years old. I submitted it 4 years ago, but the pandemic came and made everything weird. But it's kind of out now. It's still, if you go look at small press distribution, it says it's not quite available yet. Like the printer still has it, but it's on there and it's almost ready to go. Hey, so Wendy is one of my little cronies. Did you do that on purpose?
Pick Wendy's I kind of, as I was flipping through, I thought, oh, there's a Colorado poet. Yeah, let's do that.
All right, figured.
Yeah. So do you want to start us out with a poem? What do you want to read first?
Yeah, I think I'll read the opening poem in the book, actually.
Okay.
So page 1. And do you want me to wait, like when we do this, do you want me to wait for you to get it? I can't tell. I actually can't see. Or should I just start when I'm ready?
Yeah, just go ahead whenever you're ready. I'll have it up.
A note to Fernando Pessoa. We must not be afraid to buy the bananas in the street. The yellow bananas with the black splotches. The bananas hawked by sellers with unseemly yet beautiful voices. The bananas that have captured the entire morning's sun in their electric skins. We must buy the bananas even if we buy them incorrectly. Even if the eyes of the seller do not meet our eyes in the way we think they should. Even if the price is not quite right or the scales read a little high. Still, we must buy the bananas, for what else is there? And if we fail to buy them correctly, if our voice breaks when we ask the price, if we change our minds, picking first this bunch, then that one, then let us fail perfectly with bananas in our hands, yellow bananas with black splotches, and the sun swinging at the ends of our arms as we walk.
And that was what was the poem called? It was A Note to Fernando Pessoa from the Bitten World. And so can you talk a little bit about what the why you chose this for the title? And then I have the cover on the screen. There's this image of if the glare goes away, there it goes. So this is a it looks like some kind of sea plant type thing with maybe an oyster clinging to it. Is that what that is?
I don't know if it's an oyster. It's some kind of barnacle-y thing, but who knows? But so there's a quote that opens the book, after the table of contents, and it's from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it says, the quote is, "The bitten world holds the biter fast by his own teeth." So I think recently I read something, I can't remember the author or the poet who said it, but she said and it might even been on a Rattlecast, I'm not sure, but she's tried to quit poetry several times and has been unable to do it. And so it's kind of like that. And so the picture is actually taken by my friend Ellie, and it was in Maine. And it's sort of captured that. It's like, when something beautiful happens to you, or you experience something, and your attention is just grabbed onto it, it's also grabbing you at the same time. And so I thought this picture just perfectly fit that, because it's, that plant looks like it's devouring that mussel or whatever it is, but it's not, but both things are kind of just now stuck together permanently. And so it's just kind of feel that way. Poetry has taken hold of me. I try and take hold of it. And so that's kind of where it's coming from.
Yeah, and it feels like we talked about, I think maybe it was just last week, or maybe it was with David Kirby a couple of weeks ago, but we talked about how poems tend to have themes. The book, like manuscripts, probably because of the publishing world and how that operates, and how contests sort of dominate everything. But this book feels like like the theme is just noticing the world and paying attention to the world around you, and it's sort of less of a theme than most books have, I would say. It's sort of a journey through like your experiences and the things that you have noticed. Was that something that you were thinking about as you put the book together, or that's just how it came to be?
Well, I kind of did struggle with the idea of thinking that I had to have a theme and didn't have one, and so, normally you open a poetry book and it's not only is it theme, but it's broken up into sections, and each section coheres around something. That isn't for me. For me, I was talking to my father-in-law just yesterday, and he was asking me, so what do you write about? What are your themes? And I don't have a particular theme, but I think there are three. And one is nature. I do most of my writing outside, like 95% of it. So it's just what I'm seeing out in the world. There's some poems that I write what people would call political, maybe social justice. It's like, trying to ask for a better world or a kinder world. And then the other one is, I guess I use the word God, although I'm an agnostic and I don't actually believe in the Christian God per se, but that mystery, what is it that's bigger than humans, that we see kind of operating in the world, but we really can't wrap our minds around it. So those are kind of my themes. And so, yeah, it's just, how am I interacting with those three things? That's what the book is.
Yeah, well, I usually don't, have requests, but there is one poem, I think The First Rule of Poetry, which is on page 36. Hey, a little cameo. The first rule of poetry is on page 36, and that feels like it sort of captures what you're trying to do with poems and with this book. So I thought maybe that'd be a good poem to share early on, if you don't mind.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it was one I was thinking of reading anyway. So thanks. Yeah, the first rule of poetry: you have been given a gift, a curse, a knife under the ribs. You have been given a word, a vision, the toll of a distant bell. You have been given the overheard conversation, the fox sleeping atop a bale of hay, the suicide in the alley. You have been given the dewdrops pendulant on the tip of every burning blade of grass. You have been given the rape, the incinerated village, the little girl in pink shoes skipping as she sings. You have been given the hummingbird flying against the glass, the shadow of a leaf on the wood of the boardwalk, the hungry raven's cry. You have been struck with the cold cudgel of grace. Now get out of the way.
And that was the first rule of poetry, again from the Bitten World. And so,
I'm going to close that.
At your... Oh yeah, no problem.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, so yeah, so what was I gonna say? Yeah, so the Bitten World, it feels like when you look at the back of your bio here, I'll put that on screen too. Where you've worked as a bookseller, mailman, commercial fisherman, electrician, baker, carpenter. I think this is even a bigger list than I had when I read the bio. Here, a studio photographer, door-to-door salesman, and math teacher. And there's so much nature and sort of exploring. It feels like you're a roamer. Like you're, is there like an unsettledness? Like what draws you to so many different paths through life? And how does poetry tie into that? Because it seems like it must.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty complicated question. I don't know how far back to go, but I'll say that, to be open to poetry requires, for me anyway, other people do it differently, but requires a stillness. It requires just that space to be present, to be overtaken by something, to be able to give your attention to it. And so the thing I've done most is be a math teacher. And in some ways it's, the best job, and some ways it's the worst, but it takes so much of your emotional presence and your time, both, during the day, of course, and then after school, you're always planning and grading for the next day. And on the weekends, you're always working. So there's just no emotional energy left for poetry. So what I've done is I've taught for a couple of years, and then I quit and I go do something that's, kind of mindless. It's just physical labor, because that leaves my mind free. And when I leave the job is done, and I don't take it home with me. So, I can be open to what things come. And, I'm a morning writer mostly. And I feel like after you go to sleep, things, sometimes you get, dreams and visions, but it just clears things out, so you start the day with this kind of a blank slate, and it's just easier to be open. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of that, but, you can't, I'm not someone who's going to make a career out of being a baker or being an electrician. But for a while, it keeps me in physical shape, but it just lets my mind free, and so I can be open. That's the shorter. There's maybe a deeper reason, but I don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah. So do you write poetry daily in the morning? You mentioned writing in the morning. Is that like a sort of almost a religious practice or something? Is that a spiritual thing that you do regularly?
I wouldn't say it's a religious practice, in that I tend to be not as disciplined as a lot of other people. It's just, I wake up, if I can, if I'm in that situation where, I wake up and that's, I just want to go and walk and be outside. So I recently spent, several weeks camped on a beach in Texas, and it was really good for my writing, because first off, I'm next to the ocean, which is as close, I think, as we get to the infinite. And there were no distractions. There were hardly any people there. So I'd wake up before sunrise, and I would, just walk the beach, because it's what I wanted to do, and just try to be open for anything I see. So, it's just what I prefer to do. I don't think like, hey, I've got to get up and I've got to put my time in, I think I might be a more prolific or better poet if I sometimes would be more deliberate in my practice. But so far, that works for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
Okay, let's see. I think I want to read Relentless Misery, since it's the day after Christmas. And I think it's weird. I have all this listed up there. What page are you seeing it on your list there? Relentless Misery. I think it's 53 maybe. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, 53.
Okay. Gotcha.
Relentless misery are the words in the shape of a cross tattooed on the man's back. Relentless, following letter by letter the hidden bones of his spine. Misery, the cross piece hung between his shoulder blades. The man is muscular but soft, as if he was once something he is not now. And he is laughing as he moves his belongings and those of a friend into a shared locker too small for the purpose. And when the locker doesn't lock, when the quarters fall right through and the two must begin again with the next locker over, the man does not curse, does not smash his fist into the shiny metal, but merely laughs louder, along with his friend, who is skinny, without tattoos, and who turns his head toward me, beaming a beautiful smile from a face ravaged by scars.
And that was Relentless Misery from the Bitten World. To continue on the topic of careers and how jobs affect your poetry, what you said is what strikes me. I think working as a poetry editor might be one of the worst jobs for being a writer. I mean, you're just filled with all these words that aren't yours and not experiencing life except through other people's eyes, kind of. So what jobs do you think are like have served you the most as a writer? Like I remember when I was working landscaping, just one summer, maybe it was 2 summers. I just felt like just doing that manual labor, and then also being in the real world at the same time was such a great way to be practicing poetry as something sort of deeper and more spiritual or something. Just because your mind is free. And you're also doing something, you're moving, you're staying alive in an interesting way. So I don't know, how has different careers served that purpose, and are they all, is the variety helpful too?
Yeah. First, the question you had earlier about why am I, I'm 59 now. Why am I just coming out with a book now? Well, I wasn't into poetry. I started about 10 years ago. I was always a science and math kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
And, so that's why I was a math teacher, but I came to it about 10 years ago. So even though I was doing those kinds of jobs even before I was a poet. So it's kind of always been in me, but I didn't really know that was sort of my calling until about 10 years ago. So in terms of actual jobs, I think novelty is a good thing. It's like this time I just spent in Texas on the beach, that was all new to me. I'm not an ocean person. I live in Colorado, we're landlocked, and although I grew up going to the New Jersey shore a little bit, I was never a beach person. So, and I don't think it even matters really what the job is. It's just the fact that your mind is still free while you're working. And so things can come to you, So just recently, before I was in Texas, I was working as an electrician, and to be honest, as an electrician's apprentice, because technically you'd have to have a license and take these classes. So, but, and so there's newness going on. There's new parts of your brain that you're using you've never used before. You're meeting people who are in the world in a really different way than you are. Like on a construction crew, it's not the PC environment that I'm usually surrounding myself with, but you learn that these guys who would probably fail any test I would give in my high school math class know a lot of stuff in other ways. And you come away feeling like, it's good to be an amateur. There's someone who wrote a book about that recently, about about the benefit of being an amateur at something, because you're like a kid, when you're exposed to some new situation, new job, new experience, and you've got that beginner's mind where everything is interesting and exciting, and your growth curve is really rapid. And so the changing it up, I think, is good, and then really just having the freedom. But I think if I wasn't a poet at the time, but I think probably the best job that I could have had, that I had it, but I wasn't a poet, was working on the fishing boats in Alaska. Because first, Alaska, you're on a boat, you're at the ocean. It's just all this amazing stuff. But there's also, and so sometimes you're working really intensely. When the salmon are running, they're running, and there's no time to, just days are 18 hours long or whatever. But then there's a lot of downtime where you can just sit around and you have that time for reflection. And that is an essential part of it as well.
Yeah, that reminds me, we got to have Peter Monroe on, who's that marine biologist for the on those boats writing every time. He'd be a good person to talk to in the winter right now. Anyway, so you mentioned that it was only 10 years ago that you sort of turned to poetry as your calling, which you called it. How did that happen? How did you discover poetry as something that was important to you?
Well, so I was living in this town, Carbondale, Colorado. I kind of still sort of, it's the closest thing I have to a home right now is Carbondale. And it's an interesting place. It's down valley from Aspen, about 30 miles maybe. But it's historically, it was a land that was occupied by the Ute Native Americans. And then I don't actually know the exact order of all these things, but there's, a mining influx and a ranching influx. And now there's more like there's like a mountain bike ski influx. So the populations were continually changing. And I was, and then there's a lot of Latinos have moved in from Mexico and El Salvador and Honduras, which is where my father's from, Honduras. And recently, something had happened in the town back then, about 10 years ago, where I think it was a middle school teacher was assaulted by, like, I think 3 Latina girls just walking in through town. And I don't really know the whole story about it. But because of that thing, there was all of a sudden these letters to the editor that, and there was a feeling in the community, not everybody, obviously, but there's a feeling in the community of, this message of go home. The neighborhood is being ruined now because these Latinos are moving in. And so one morning I was up, there's a little graveyard above town, and in this beautiful meadow with this view of this huge, awe-inspiring mountain. And I'm reading the Divine Comedy, and I don't even remember. I think it's in the Paradiso, and Dante the Pilgrim, his uncle, is talking about Florence in the 1300s, and he's making the exact same argument that the neighborhood is being ruined by all the new people moving into Florence. And it just, so I hadn't really written poetry before, but I'm sitting there and in this graveyard. It's like the sun just came up over the ridge. The frost is melting. It's dripping on the tombstones. It's being lit back by the sun. All of a sudden, the Catholic church bells ring. And something like happened in my mind. It was just this weird juxtaposition of all these things. This raven flies overhead. The tombstone I'm sitting at is there's 2 right there. One is is a Latina name who was like buried there in the 50s, way before any of this stuff. And the one next to it is Anderson, and I have relatives who are Anderson. It's just all this weird coincidence stuff. And so I just got out my pen and I wrote a poem about that idea that there's always this new change coming in, and the new people coming in are always the bad people, and we're always the good people. And above it all sits this mountain, Mount Sopris, that has been there and will be there. It was there long before any of us. It'll be there long after. And it's just, it operates on a different time scale, and something about all that stuff, it just crystallized something. And so I wrote this long poem with rhymes and all kinds of stuff. And I sent it as a letter to the editor for the local paper. And there was this guy named Cam Scott, who's been a mentor and friend ever since, who was a poet out in Oregon. And he's written a couple books. But he saw it, he read it in the paper, and then contacted the paper and said, who is this guy who's, writing these poems? Because then I wrote another one later or something. And so he contacted me, and we sort of started a little writing group together. And so he's the one that really said to me, hey, you really are a poet, and it's okay. It's we forgive you and go forward. And so and I've been doing it since then.
Yeah, that's a great story, because it feels like, everybody has these sort of rich, important experiences where you're struck by sort of the significance of your place in the world and strange things that happen. And then poets write them down and save them, which is sort of the difference between people who are poets or not. So it's really cool to hear your story, how it came to be in that such a spontaneous way. Had you read much poetry up until that point? Was that something that you read but didn't write?
Yeah, no, and I don't, like, even the time at reading Divine Comedy, I don't think of that. Even now, I don't really think of it as poetry, although it really is. But no, I didn't, I would have read Walt Whitman, and only because when I was in Alaska, a good friend of mine, Andy Burgess, carried around a copy of Leaves of Grass with him. And although I don't know that he ever became we lost touch if he became a poet who wrote, but he had that same wandering sort of hunger for the mystery. And so I had read Walt Whitman and, the things that you hear growing up, like Robert Frost or whatever. But no, I had never sought out poetry to read. And now it's like, for a while, it's all I wanted to read. And once I discovered poetry, I couldn't read novels because it just seemed like, oh my God, shut up already. There are just so many words. It's like, let me think my own thoughts. But I've gotten a little bit past that now, and I've been enjoying some novels again, which feels more balanced. But.
Yeah, I have the same experience. So if anybody has any questions for Jose, please do leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass them along. But let's do another poem.
Yeah. Hey, so let's see. I made a list, but when I'm looking at you, I can't see my list of poems that I wanted to read. So let's go with one that Rattle published. In fact, the only one, you've published 6 of my poems now, but the only one that made it into this book, because this book is, I submitted the manuscript so long ago, was Violaceae. So that's on page 24. And normally I wouldn't like to give a background on a poem, but But this poem was written as Poet of Your Poets Respond. So if someone was hearing it when it was written, experiencing it, they would have had this background anyway. So I wrote it. It was a day or two after that Manchester bombing that was in a Manchester arena in England. I think it was 2018, maybe, the Ariana Grande concert. And I happened to be walking in the Maroon Bells, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but when you think of iconic images of Colorado, the Maroon Bells is probably the number one place that you see. And there's this lake and then these kind of reddish mountains, and often they have snow, or maybe it's a fall shot. So I'm walking in this ungodly beautiful place, and it's kind of late spring, so there's still a little bit of snow around on the ground, and I didn't intentionally try and write a poem in response to the Manchester bombing. It's just that's the space I was in when I saw these flowers growing in the ground. So the poem is called Violaceae, and that's the Latin name for the family of that includes all the violets. So Violaceae. If we must have violence, then let it be the violence of violets, how they burst into spring before most anything else, vanguard of the voluptuous, unraveling their petals, their leaves, to attract whatever will love them. If we must rant and rave, then let us do so as they do, inconspicuously, close to the ground, in all the wet places, until something with a stinger comes and mounts us, turning us inward, where we learn what it is to sweeten.
Yeah, and that was Violaceae? How do you say that?
Well, I think I have my degree is in forestry, so I think I know how to pronounce it, but it's been a while. It's Violaceae.
Violaceae. Yeah, and that is from the Bitten World, of course, and from Rattle's Poets Respond. And here's a photo of, it was slow to pull it up, but here are those maroon bells that we were talking about before, that beautiful area of Colorado, those mountains in that valley. So
and Tim,
yeah,
I know it's probably mostly poets who tune into this thing. So for me, when I wrote this poem, what was driving was just the only thing that drove it was the fact that the word violet and violence sound almost indistinguishable to me.
Yeah.
But yet they're so opposite experiences in the world. And so if you notice that first stanza, what's driving it is I just tried to put as many V's in there as possible. It's just the sound of the V sound, and then the second stanza that disappears. But and it's interesting to me how, for the poets out there, how poems come to you in different ways and what drives them. Sometimes it's an idea that you're trying to get across, and it's more of a didactic thing, and sometimes it's just a visual experience that you have. But that one was an oral experience of just the sound of violet and violence. And I think it's a poem will also often work better, for me at least, if there is something driving it that's not about, oh, this is how I feel about something and I want to tell you what it is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever, I think I remember looking this up, but I don't remember what I found. Does the word violet and violence etymologically have anything to do with each other? Do you remember?
No, I don't, and I don't remember ever looking for it. That's kind of lame of me, but I'm going to after this.
Yeah. Well, maybe as you talk, I'll look it up really quick again. But
yeah.
But so talk a little bit about your process, about how poems come to be, because you mentioned having, you just now mentioned having not be something you want to express, but some other angle to sort of enter into what you're talking about. So there we know how the poem came to be, but in general, like, how do poems operate? Like, where do they come from? And once you have something that you want to write about, or you start writing, do you know what you're writing about before you start, or are you like searching for what the actual topic is? How does that process go as you're starting a poem?
Well, I tend to be, I guess, what maybe other people would call passive. And I already described, like, I write in the morning, I write outside, and usually I'm just looking for something that is interesting. That's, kind of basically it. And so recently, when I was just down in Texas, it's a poem I don't have prepared to share, but it's called Jellyfish by Moonlight. And I was walking on the beach at 3, 4 in the morning, and all these jellyfish are washed up on the shore like they often are, but during the daytime you can't see them because they're translucent. So it's not till you get right on top of one will you actually see the jellyfish, because it's, you're just looking through them at the sand. But at 3, 4 in the morning, and the moon was at this perfect angle, and the shore was at the perfect angle, and the light was bouncing off the jellyfish, the light that's bouncing off the moon. And so they were all lit up. And, that's kind of one of those magical moments that you hope you're just going to see. And so I just started writing jellyfish by moonlight. That's all I had. I had no intention. This wasn't going to go anywhere. I had no, thing I wanted to do, but it was just trying to honor that moment. So that's mostly what it is. I do have some poems though that are, and actually I'll read one later, but where I definitely have there's much more of a mission maybe, or that a purpose that I want. And then the other part of my process is, so I write everything by hand, or 99% by hand in the little journals that I carry around. And then when I come back inside, I'll sit down at my computer and I'll type them up. And often the form of the poem won't happen until then. Like when I'm writing in my journal, I don't care about stanzas or line breaks or for most part. And then when I'm putting them on the computer, that's when it might make sense that it's a prose poem, or it's one stanza, or it goes into couplets or triplets or whatever, who knows. But then I send them out I have a few friends, Matt Daly, who's probably the one who I've been sending out poems most and the longest. He's a poet in Wyoming, and so you should check his artwork. It's Daly, Matt Daly. So we exchange a lot, and I'm going to read some poems that would not exist if I didn't have that connection with Matt Daly. And then and then I have this new poet friend, Earl Hines. He goes by A.E. Hines, a great poet, but we've just met within the past year, although we never physically met. There's a poet in Hawaii named Eric Paul Schaefer, and then Camp Scott, and so there's these several people who we send our first drafts back and forth, and sometimes we critique each other and we give suggestions, but for Matt and I, more often the benefit comes when we don't critique each other, but we just write a poem that was inspired, and that's all. There's no hey, how you doing? Sometimes it's just I send him a poem with nothing but the poem, and then he sends a poem back that's inspired, and then maybe I send another one triggered on his, and that's a big part of my process, and it's a really important thing, not just for the poems, but often as writing poetry can be a very lonely business, and often it doesn't feel lonely. It's just solitude and you're off by yourself. But it's really nice to have a community of other people who are doing kind of the same thing with you as you, and feel like you're there together and you're sharing things. When you're camping on the beach in Texas by yourself for 2 weeks, it's nice to be able to go to a coffee shop and reach out to a friend and say, here's what I've got. What do you have?
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that too. Just to circle back on that question about etymology, violent does come from violet. In Middle English, the word was also applied in reference to heat, sunlight, smoke, etc., with a sense of having some quality so strongly as to produce a powerful effect. And that's where the word violently came from the word violet, which itself is comes from iodine. So viola was the iodine or ion in the pre-Indo-European substrate Mediterranean language. Very interesting. So that is a really cool connection. Yeah.
Yeah, because that violet, the flower there growing on the ground, this little thing inconspicuously under the clumps by the trailhead, had enough power that it overtook my being and made me write a poem, which then you published and gave the Neil Postman Award, for, which is pretty funny. Oh no, that was the divorce poem.
The divorce one, yeah.
But I'll read Divorce later, or maybe now if you're ready. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to read that now?
Yeah, so that's not in the book, so that's attached. Okay. I gave you that document, so let me find it here too. Divorce, and this poem wouldn't exist if it wasn't for my friend Matt, because it's about Matt's life. It's not my divorce. It was Matt's divorce, and so he was going through this experience, and then the experience that I write about just happened, and I just wanted to write about what I was experiencing, but it totally just got meshed in with Matt's experience. So, divorce. He has flown I'm going to take my glasses off. He has flown headfirst against the glass, and now lies stunned on the stone patio, nothing moving but his quick beating heart. So you go to him, pick up his delicate body, and hold him in the cupped palms of your hands. You have always known he was beautiful, but it's only now, in his stillness, in his vulnerability, that you see the miracle of his being, how so much life fits in so small a space. And so you wait, keeping him warm against the unseasonable cold, trusting that when the time is right, when he has recovered both his strength and his sense of up and down, he will gather himself, flutter once or twice, and then rise, a streak of dazzling color against a slowly lifting sky.
Yeah, very interesting. It's really interesting to read that now. Thinking about, I imagined it was your own divorce. I think because we published that poem about first newlyweds with a dog. Remember?
Yeah, Canis Interruptus.
yeah, Canis Interruptus. Very funny poem about about just being married, and so I think I sort of read one into the other as a narrative, but it's even more touching, I think, to think of it as witnessing what a friend is going through, and in the way that's just a wonderful metaphor, which is something that you do in your poems frequently. It's just you have these great metaphors. A lot of times they're extended like they are through here. Can you explain a little bit about where those come from, and is what strikes you the metaphor at first, or is it in the process of writing? And how do you I don't know, make yourself think in terms of metaphor? The interesting thing, talking to somebody who won the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor, is when I started that award, I thought we'd get a lot of submissions that were full of more metaphor, and it was because we didn't have a lot of it's a sort of a surprising lack of metaphor in poems that made me want to do an award for that. And it's hard to find, actually, going through the poems, to find things that are really original. There's great images, great storytelling, great narrative and observations and things about life in the poems, but focusing on metaphor, it really makes it stark how rare they are to be pulled off so well. So how do you approach creating metaphors and making that newness in the world that they represent?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said about being a roamer. If everything, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, kind of a thing. So I tend to be unanchored in the world, and so a lot of my poems, I feel, maybe if I'm going to critique and be on the negative side of things, I'll say they're too disconnected from, the kind of poetry that a lot of people do like, where it's, you got a relationship of a particular person you're talking about, or a specific event that happened. And my experience of the world tends to be sort of on this, it's not abstract, but it's more on the universal plane than the particular. Now, and you often can't really depict a universal without a particular experience. But even though I'm agnostic, I feel that my mind tends to go in ways that are spiritual and larger constructs than smaller things. So, and then I guess the other thing I would say about metaphor is I tend to write that way because metaphors have a lot more room in them. Because if you create a metaphor, people will respond to it or not. But if they do respond to it, they're going to probably respond to it in many different ways because, how does that metaphor connect with their experience of the world? And the thing that I don't like about prose so much is it doesn't leave a lot of room often. I mean, there are fiction writers and prose writers who write with a lot of poetic space. Like when I read There by Tommy Orange, to me that felt kind of like a poem. It was just beautiful. And there's many more, but for me, I'm a poet of concision. I like to write as few words as possible. I mean, sometimes I can get too verbose in my poetry, but in general, I kind of write poems that are pretty narrowed down. And one of the reasons, or I think the benefit of it, is that leaves room for the reader to put themselves and their experience into the poem and be able to react to it from their way. I don't like over prescribing the meaning of a poem. And sometimes I was recently, in an MFA program and exchanging with a great poet who would often ask me, well, what does this mean? And I kind of resist that to some degree. It might mean something for me, and it doesn't even have to mean something for me. If I get some words that flow through me and I feel like there's something there, I don't feel like I have to know what that something is necessarily. My job is to pass it on, and so someone else may. And it's funny because people will talk to me about poems that I've written and talk about them and describe what they mean in ways that would have never occurred to me. And they're assuming that's what I mean, but it's what they mean when they, what's the meaning they get when they read it. So I think metaphor just allows that to happen in a way that, straight narrative doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I've felt that way about prose for a long time. It's hard for me to read, but I've never heard anybody quite articulate it, and I haven't been able to really put my finger on it either. But it is that sense that like even when a great line goes by, the sort of text is still going, and you don't have that space to just appreciate the moment, and it feels so it's just like too much, even when it's really good writing and prose for me, which is what draws me to poetry. There's a question here from Spartacus. It touched on something you said earlier about the mountain in the sense of time, but Spartacus asks, what is the poet relationship with time? Do you feel that if you tell, like a scientist at the beginning of each paragraph to the reader where you are going, has the journey finished? So how does time operate within a poem, and how do you think of that? Because the biggest example, of course, is the haiku, where the sort of there's a cut, there's a kurigi, and there are different spaces of time between the two. And I think poetry does that a lot too. But how do you think about that, the time in poems?
Yeah, my first reaction, I'm not having a good answer to that, but my first reaction is that I would like my poems to be timeless, in some ways, in that, I mean, there are beautiful poems that are written that are just very specifically occurring in time, and they can be amazing. Like when I think about like Ellen Bass's Gate C-22, it's just, there's just this really real experience happening in an airport gate that's just gorgeous, right? That there's no like, dimensions of the infinite or mystery or anything. It's just beautiful love between two people, So that's awesome. And I wish I could write more of those. And occasionally I get a little bit of it, but yeah, I think I want expansiveness, and so that would mean in space, in feeling, in time, and all of it. So if anything, I guess I'm not that rooted in time. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer, and I'll think about it later, and it'll be too late, but but I appreciate the question.
I think that's a good answer. Let's hear another poem.
Okay, let's see. What should we do here? Let's do, well, since it's kind of that, let's do this page 77, excerpts in the book, excerpts from a field guide to getting lost. It also goes back to your question about roaming and all that stuff, and my general approach. So there's this book that was written by Rebecca Solnit called A Field Guide to Getting Lost. And I've since read the book, but when I wrote this poem, I hadn't read it. So I just was intrigued by the title, A Field Guide to Getting Lost. And as someone with a zoology degree and forestry stuff, field guides were a big part of my life, but it was for birds and trees and that kind of thing. And so A Field Guide to Getting Lost just sounded really interesting. So I thought about what could be in a book like that. And then subsequently, I read the book later, and it has nothing to do with what I wrote. But anyway, excerpts from A Field Guide to Getting Lost. If you have a compass, smash it. Nothing can point you to true anything, let alone true north. Besides, and never forget this, you are trying to get lost. You may be gone for a long time, so be sure not to pack any food or water. It is only the hungry who feed, only the thirsty who are quenched. Before you leave, be sure to write a note telling everyone exactly where you will not be. The last thing you need is someone coming to your rescue. Now, find the best possible map and tear it up. Sorry, the best map possible and tear it up. You will be traveling on a scale no one has ever drawn. Do not leave a string of crumbs behind you. This would only attract predators. On second thought, go ahead. Write postcards telling everyone of your adventures. Be sure to lie, like a fox leaving false tracks. Someday they will thank you. You will not know when you have arrived, but if you think you have, you haven't. If you think you haven't, you probably have. If you come to a fork in the road, stab yourself in the foot with it. You will reach your destination much faster if you are limping. Better yet, use it to pluck out your eyes. There are many signposts along the way. Maybe now you will learn to see.
Excellent. That was excerpts from A Field Guide to Getting Lost from the Bitten World. And so can you talk a little bit about that, about what nature means to you? And I don't know how to say this, but like, there's a sense that just nature, we're losing nature at such a rapid rate. And in our connection to nature at an even more rapid rate than that. And the thing that troubles me the most are the lack of insects. Do you have that experience over the years of have you seen the changes in nature? I mean, it is true that I remember driving and just the car being covered in bugs, and then and now that does not happen. And that's kind of terrifying because who eats the bug? I mean, it just goes down the food chain. I mean, how many fewer birds? I think there are half as many birds as there were 50 years ago because they don't have as much food. So have you experienced that change? And I mean, what is your sort of observations of that?
Well, I know it's happening, but I tend to be so immersed in it and I live in Colorado, so I live in places where there's still a lot of they would say untrammeled wilderness areas, and so I just spend all my time out there. So, and I can always find that solitude almost anywhere I go. I find it. So it's definitely happening, but so I go there, and I think I trust a river more than I trust people, and so that's where I want to spend my time. And I write about it. I try and write about it. What's that book that was just the Overstory? So in terms of prose, if you want to read a great book, did you read the Overstory, Ted?
No, I haven't.
No. So it's Richard Powers, and I think he won one of the big prizes. I don't even remember which one, but and it's just about trees and people's relation to trees, and it's just a beautiful book. And it doesn't, it's part of it is about a group of people who go and try, and they just get so driven by the desecration of nature that they turn into kind of earth first type people, where they're willing to put their life on the line to save all of us, really, but nature. And it doesn't, they don't succeed. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing, like we just have to fight the fight we fight, whether we hope we're to win or not. And so I fight that fight through poetry. There are people who are, and they say, well, poetry doesn't change anything in the world, but I think it can, and I think it does, and it's like, so I'll write a poem that will be, and maybe I'll read one of those next, that is what I would say a social justice poem, which includes, nature. And it may seem, how many people read it? I don't know. If the people do read it, does it do anything? I don't know. But it's like, there are 8 billion of us, and I'm going to do my tiny, tiny little thing. And I just think if you're putting out a positive thing into the world, and if we all did that little tiny thing, it has to matter, at some point. And so, and my calling seems to be writing. And in the past I've been involved in more like protesty kind of things and stuff like that, but and those are important, and I'm glad, I shouldn't say that I have a lot of respect for for sabotage in regards to the environment, but when I hear that someone stops a pipeline flowing, I'm cheering. I think that's awesome. And anyway, I'm starting to ramble now, but
no. First, so it was Richard Powers, the Overstory. Someone's mentioning, just so people can check it. And then I think you mentioned a Gate poem. Did you mean Naomi Shihab Nye's Gate A4? Or is there a different poem by Alan Bass?
Yes, Gate C22.
Gate C22.
Just go, sometime on your own. Go ahead and read that.
We'll have to look that up. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's I won't describe it, and I used to think that was her best poem ever. I mean, I don't know all of her work anyway, but I just recently picked up her newer book called Indigo, mm-hmm. and she has a poem in there called "Bringing Flowers to Salinas Valley State Prison" that is just a knockout. And again, very rooted in time, very rooted in place, very rooted in specific people, not some big universal thing where my brain tends to go. And it's up there as well. So I'm just for the poets out there, if they don't know that.
Yeah, maybe in the open line section we'll read. I pulled it up here, Gate C22. I'm not familiar with this, but Ellen was on Rattlecast like 30 if anybody wants to go watch that episode back then. Let's hear the next poem. All
right, so let's let me see. What do I want to do here of those? Let's go for Countertop. So it's one of the ones not in the book. Okay. And it's on page 4 in that little PDF I sent you. So Countertop. I run my hand along the surface and feel a smoothness like volcanic glass. The granite comes all the way from India, but when I look closely, I see nebulae. I see galaxies. I see little black suns orbited by little black planets. and on the planets deep black holes dug by broken black bodies. And I see the black bodies heaving black stones, and the stones burnished in black blood and buffed by black bone to the smoothness of volcanic glass. And on the counter I lay bread, apples, cheese, green olives, and those little swords we use to stab the olives, so we can lift them to our mouths without dirtying our hands.
Yeah, another great metaphor at the end, another great example of that. And there's a question here, let me pull this up again, from Dick Westheimer. He asked if you can, where did it go? Was it over here? He asked about how your use of ideas sort of as a source of poems. Here it is. So here's a question: could you talk more about how poems come from ideas? I guess is what his question is.
All right. Well, now I know what I'll read for my next poem. But how poems come from ideas. Well, there are things that just drive me, right? So let's talk about Countertop. I think this was, several years ago, but I think what was happening is my friend Ellie was house sitting somewhere, and I was over there, and they have this beautiful countertop, and these granite countertops are just gorgeous, and I love things like stone and wood and sky, that kind of stuff. So I could see the appeal, but I had recently I think I had read something about that a lot of the granite is being mined in India, and a lot of it is slave labor, even to this day, And so I just that sometimes what drives a poem is just the paradox, the cognitive dissonance that comes about when of something that's just beautiful that you love, and then you hear about there's the dark side of that same thing, and so that's where Countertop came from. But so I would say this is like in the political social justice kind of poem. But so there's this a poet, Reginald Dwayne Betts, who I think was a recent MacArthur Grant awardee, and he had said something in a Zoom that I was attending, a podcast or whatever it was, where he said that you need, like, the more powerful political statement, it will include a self-incrimination. Like, if you don't own your part of it, then maybe you shouldn't be talking, unless you really don't have a part in it. And, I don't own a countertop, a granite countertop, but still, the parts I'm responsible as well for, and a lot of us are, for the things that are, ruining people's lives and ruining our planet. And so, I try and, because I think if I own my part of it, then it invites the reader to own their own part. And if there is going to be any change at all in the world from my minuscule little push, it's going to have to come from the fact that other people are going to be moved that little bit, and recognize their own part in it. So,
yeah. And speaking of social justice, we talked a little bit on our pre-call about your use of the name Jose, whereas in emails you sign it Tony. But you said it was important to you to use Jose in publishing. Can you just explain a little bit about that? You mentioned why.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about it too, because there's a chance that there's some people who knew me from high school, a long time ago, and are like, "Why the hell is he right under Jose? He's not Jose." They, some of them might not even known that was my name. But so at the time I started writing this 10 years ago, I was living, and working. I was living outside of Aspen, but I was working in Aspen, and in Aspen. And in this valley in general, where there's a fairly large, Hispanic population, sort of there's a part of the prevailing white culture that would assume anyone named Jose mows lawns or washes dishes or is a menial servant, and and there's not everybody for sure, but and so it was important to me that people see a name like Jose Alcántara and realize that people with those kinds of names can do things other than menial labor. And it's kind of ironic because I do a lot of manual labor, but maybe by choice more than some other people have it. And then the other part is my father's name is Jose Alcántara, but he doesn't have a middle name. So that's why it's Jose A. Alcántara, just to distinguish me from him. But it's weird for me. It's hard to, because anytime I do anything, like I meet someone who's first encountered me through my poetry and they're calling me Jose and it just feels weird, and so but for some people that's still how they know me. And other people, if I figure, well, we're going to have a long-term relationship where either in person or online or whatever, then I go by Tony with there. So,
well, let's hear the next poem.
Okay, so let's again on the ones that I handed to you. It's called let me see what page it's on. Page 6, First Protocol of Zion. And again, this was because the gentleman asked about ideas and poems. So this poem, I don't really know where it began per se. But I know, like, through the process of editing and before I finished it and decided to send it out, that I had I was trying to accomplish a lot with this poem. This is what I would call an ambitious poem, not ambitious for me, but ambitious for the poem. I wanted to do a lot, and it's a short poem. But anyway, we'll read it, and then I'd like to talk about kind of where it came from and stuff. Okay, so the First Protocol of Zion. With Usura hath no man a house of good stone, Ezra Pound. It's the interest that interests me, the far and above, that which exceeds the nominal value of the exchange. I want to give back something beyond the original debt, something gratuitous yet essential, like the peacock's tail, or the fringe on the fringed gentian, how it grows purple, miraculous, above tree line, amid the white, expansive stone. So that poem, I think, the easiest way to get into it, or let me go back a little bit. I don't know, like, where does this poem first come from? Does it come from my love of the fringe gentian? I mean, that could be like, I moved to Colorado in 1993. And when I arrived to teach at this place called the Keystone Science School. And it's up at 9,000 feet. But I think we were there for maybe a day or two. And right away, they took us to this hut that's at 11,500 feet or something. I think it was the Fowler-Hilliard hut for those who are Colorado folks. And we spent a couple of days there kind of getting to know the crew and getting to know the habitat, because the teaching was mostly, the ecology of the alpine and subalpine and montane, environment. And that's the first time I ever saw a fringed gentian. It's just this gorgeous flower, but it's made more gorgeous because of where it grows. It just grows up in these, these alpine, subalpine environments that are, what some people call the alpine sublime. And so maybe this poem started back then, it's just that fringed gentian. But ultimately, I guess I would want to explain it in a parallel way. Like when you think about Woody Allen, I've loved Woody Allen's movies. I still love Woody Allen's movies. But, then we have this issue that maybe he's a pedophile. I know that I don't know. I know that you don't know. I know that none of us probably know except Woody and the kid, whether he really is a pedophile. And so it's easy to either say, well, I don't care, or I'm never going to look at a Woody Allen movie again. And I think that's a cop-out. And I think it's better to, you have to, if you want to. I mean, you don't have to, but yeah, I think it's better. I want to engage in that kind of thing. And and so I'm doing this with Ezra Pound. And if you're for the people who aren't poets, you probably never heard of Ezra Pound. But if you are a poet, Ezra Pound is a big name, even if you don't read his poetry or like his poetry. And so, but I wanted to, so Ezra Pound not only was this big thing in poetry, but he was a famous anti-Semite, and during the war was making broadcasts for Mussolini in favor of the Axis powers. So, it's that same kind of thing with Woody Allen. So I wanted to, but, as a poet, the station in a metro and the leaves on a wet black bough or whatever it is, he's got, there's some things, and this line, the line that I have there, with Usura hath no man a house of good stone. To me, that is just a beautiful line, because I like that archaic language of hath. And in the metaphor, it's a house of good stone. He's clearly not talking about the fact that you can't go buy fine Italian marble and build a nice house. It's a metaphor. So it's this gorgeous line, and I don't want to just toss it away because Ezra Pound was insane. So I want to confront it. And so the title, The First Protocol of Zion, comes from one of the classic anti-Semite, things, is there's this alleged manifesto that explains the Jewish plan to dominate the world, and it's called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. So like in the way that the LGBTQ movement has reclaimed the word queer, and the way that the African American has reclaimed the word nigger and say, no, these are our words and you don't get to use them. I guess I'm trying to do the same thing with Ezra Pound and his anti-Semitism. I'm trying to turn something ugly and make it beautiful, like the fringed gentian is beautiful to me. So I just take that word usura, the usury of charging interest on a loan, which is part of his, I mean, I kind of agree that usury is a horrible thing. I think it's absurd that people get rich simply because they have money to give other people, and so they make more money because they already have money. It is definitely a problem. But for him, he equates that with Judaism, which is obviously absurd. So, I just wanted to take and show a beautiful flower living in a house of good stone. That fringed gentian doesn't need to have a fringe, right? The peacock. Well, I guess maybe the peacock needs to have a tail to have, but it seems like it's pretty, pretty gratuitous. So that's an idea that's very, that is a very idea-driven poem, but it's, I feel like I tried to make it do a good job by embedding that idea in something that's beautiful on its own, to carry the weight of the idea.
Yeah, it's interesting how you describe that. I always think of poems as living in the spaces between our thoughts and the ambiguities between them. And so that's always the difficulty with anything political or anything sort of motivated where you're trying to sort of address a topic, is that they end up in our ideas instead of the spaces between our ideas. So how do you confront, because you mentioned a few times writing political poetry, like how do you get past that problem and make sure that you're saying something that's complicated enough that it's worth saying?
Yeah. Well, first my first reader is me, right? So I can't spend too much time thinking about how someone else is going to react to it. I have to just kind of trust my instinct, and then I send it off to these other poets, and they'll correct me, or they might say, hey, you're a little off the line here, or whatever. So, and I trust them because I know them, But I think if you're writing, I know they're two different things. Some people say you have to keep considering your audience, and to some degree you do. But I think if you're spending too much time worrying about how other people are going to react, it's not going to work. But on the other hand, if you're writing a political poem, you can't start off. I mean, people tend to be defensive about me included, defensive about a place that they're standing in the world in regards to an issue that affects their life, And so if you can't get those defenses up right away. So, you need an entry point. And so for me, the fringed gentian is the entry point. And then like I said with Betts, the self-incrimination is an entry point. And there's a poem in this book. I don't know if I should read it or not, but I don't know if I will, but there's a poem in the Bitten World that I can't even remember what it's called right now, but Obsidian. And I was told that I should probably take it out. Like one of my people who blurbed the back of my book, who said, you might want to take that poem out. And, but because in that poem, I confess to my racism. And, and I recently read Kendi's book, Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. And it's an incredible book. Like, it's, in some ways it's preaching to the choir, I think, to me, but I still learned a hell of a lot by reading that book. And in one of his phrases, he says, denial, I think this is a paraphrase, but denial is the root of racism and confession is the root of anti-racism. And so, I think, if you can, like I said if you can own your part, then I think someone who's reading your political position, and I clearly have one in the First Protocol of Zion, that they're more willing to hear it because you've said, hey, in some sense, I'm a broken person. Maybe you're a broken person too, and it's okay. So I just think that's a key thing. But.
Yeah. Kind of a follow-up question to that. Daniel Mask asks, what political issue are you apprehensive of writing about? Is there anything that you avoid? It kind of seems like not.
Probably not, but let me think about that. Yeah, because I also have a poem in there in the book called Thou Shalt Not. That's about Christ masturbating on a park bench, So if I'm going to write that, there's probably not a lot I'm not going to write about. But I don't know. I don't think there's anything I wouldn't touch if I felt I had something new and interesting to say about it,
Yeah. Well, we're past the hour, and We'll read one last poem. But what do you have that's going on between, because this book is now, you mentioned the poems are already 4 years old or so. What do you have that you're working on now? Is there anything that's forthcoming or a manuscript that you're sending out or anything? When's the next book going to be?
I don't have a book that's forthcoming, but I do have I have a poem coming out in Plowshares in April. I have, 3 poems that were just coming out in the Bennington Review, just accept, I don't know, actually a publication date. So what I'm doing now is I'm applying for lots of writing residencies and stuff like that. Some other writing, there's a residency where you can go live at Jack Kerouac's house in Orlando, Florida for 3 months.
I know somebody who did that. Yeah.
Right. So that's really where my energy is right now. I mean, I'm still trying to write every day, but that, in terms of moving forward, that, and then if I get one of those residencies, I'll be trying to put together a second collection. I just was doing a semester of an MFA, which the people at Pacific University, just wonderful, particularly the director, but everybody. I mean, Ellen Bass is there, and Dorianne Lux, and just Danusha Lamaris, who is just a new discovery for me and is just a gem, just people like that. And I loved it, and I would love to go again, but financially it's a little bit difficult for me right now. And they switched it was going to be this is a long distance program, but you have a in-person residency. And because of COVID, they've now gone back once again to a virtual residency. And I did that in the fall, or the summer and the fall. And it was great, but I can't justify spending the money that it's going to cost me and the debt I have to go into for a virtual residency. So I'm going to hold off on that and maybe re-enroll when we can be in person again. But I'm also, I've been living either house sitting or staying with friends, but mostly I've been living in a tent since July. And I was a teacher, and again, I do it and then I stop and then I do it again. But I just, I want to be able to write, and so I was putting together a chapbook. I'm putting together poems that might turn into a chapbook about that kind of experience of trying to be in the world without a steady home and a steady job and all the anchors that keep us healthy and feeling like we belong. It's and I wrote a poem about an owl called Toward a Ravishing Demise, and that seems like a good working title for the chapbook as well. So I'm kind of working on that as well. But we'll see. I'm just writing and trying to find more time to write.
Yeah, well, I hope you do, write that chapbook, and it sounds like something that I haven't seen, having read thousands of chapbooks and books and things like that. So let's finish up with, and I wanted to say too that the Pacific program is just amazing. Like so many poets we publish go through that program. So if anybody's out there looking for a program, that's definitely the best one. I was going to agree with that too. Let's finish out the interview with one last poem. Okay,
I think I'll read Lady in Rags, and it's again not in the book. Okay. So let me find it, and you find it, and just and this poem, like my book, The Bitten World, is dedicated to Ellie. If you see the dedication page, that's Eleanor J. Scott. But there's actually a lot of Scotts in my life. I was thinking about this the other day. The director of the program at Pacific is named Scott Korb, and is just a glorious, wonderful human being who I've never met, but on the Zoom. And then I was thinking, I played on a volleyball team in college where there are 6 people on a volleyball team, and 3 of them were Scots. And now Ellie Scott has been on this poetry ride for me for the last 7 years. And so this poem it's inspired by her, but also I was a Game of Thrones fan. So I didn't watch originally when it first came out, but eventually went and watched it. And I think I've watched it all through twice now. But so it's also from now I can't remember the character's name, but the woman. Were you a Game of Thrones fan?
Yeah, except for the last season, or the last half of the last season.
So what was the woman who became who was like in love with Jaime Lannister, who became the she was the guard to.
Yeah,
Bren? Bren, yeah. So this poem is inspired by both Ellie, who actually did what it says in the poem, and then by that character. So it's called The Lady in Rags. She puts her pants on all wrong, seams out, zippers in, pockets closed. A reminder that the world is convention, is compromise, is habit, and that she will not play along. She wants to be uncomfortable, inconvenienced, irritated. Her pants a spur in the flank, a pebble in the shoe, She wears her clothes like a flag, like a banner borne before her in battle. She is marching to the heart of it, passing by the watering hole, keeping her own company. She will not trade something for nothing, will not stand with her hands stuffed in her pockets. She sallies forth, singing a song no one has ever sung, a song she writes as she goes.
Beautiful. Lady in Rags, a newer poem. Tony, thanks so much for being a guest. It's just been a great hour to spend with you and sharing your poems, get to know you better. That's why I love doing these Rattlecasts, but it's been great.
Thank you, Tim. Awesome. See you later.
Yep. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
That was José A. Alcántara, of course, with his book, which you can find right here, The Bitten World. It's available if you go to tebotbach.org right now. It's not available yet, so like bookmark that or something. And I looked around. I think we jumped the gun a little bit on this in this interview because it's not quite available. I couldn't find it on Amazon or small press distribution, as Tony said, but it's a great book, and so pick this up when you can find it. And it should be up there soon, I'm pretty sure. The website for Tebot Bach, it's actually it's TEBOTBACH.org, tebotbach.org, and they're part of the collective where Rattle came out of in the 90s, actually, here in LA, from those Jack Grapes workshops that we used to do. And Rattle was a class chapbook of there, and one of the other class projects was Spillway and Tebot Bach, all in this sort of collective. I think they called it the Los Angeles Poets Collective back in the 90s. So it was interesting to see that they were publishing Tony's book. And then once again, that is The Bitten World. And let me read, before we go to break, let me share this poem from Ellen Bass. This is Gate C22, which maybe I've read this before, but I too, when Tony mentioned it, I was thinking of the Naomi Shihab Nye poem, Gate A2, I think her poem is. But this is Ellen Bass's Gate C22 poem. So let's read this since we talked about it. There's Ellen. And here is the poem. This is from poets.org, the Academy of American Poets website. Gate C22. At Gate C22, in the Portland airport, a man in a broadband leather hat kissed a woman arriving from Orange County. They kissed and kissed and kissed long after the other passengers clicked the handles of their carry-ons and wheeled briskly towards short-term parking. The couple stood there, arms wrapped around each other, like he'd just staggered off the boat at Ellis Island, like she'd been released at last from ICU, snapped out of a coma, survived bone cancer, made it down from Annapurna in only the clothes she was wearing. Neither of them was young. His beard was gray. She carried a few extra pounds you could imagine her saying she had to lose. But they kissed lavish kisses like the ocean in the early morning, the way it gathers and swells, sucking each rock under, swallowing it again and again. We were all watching, passengers waiting for the delayed flight to San Jose, the stewardesses, the pilots, the aproned woman icing Cinnabons, the man selling sunglasses. We couldn't look away. We could taste the kisses crushed in our mouths. But the best part was his face, when he drew back and looked at her, his smile soft with wonder, almost as though he were a mother still open from giving birth, as your mother must have looked at you, no matter what happened after, if she beat you or left you, or you're lonely now. You once lay there, the vernix not yet wiped off, and someone gazed at you, as if you were the first sunrise seen from the earth. The whole wing of the airport hushed. All of us trying to slip into that woman's middle-aged body, her plaid Bermuda shorts, sleeveless blouse, glasses, little gold hoop earrings, tilting our heads up. Yeah, beautiful poem. That's from The Human Line. That's Gate C22 by Ellen Bass. Thanks to Tony for highlighting that poem and suggesting that we read it. So there you go. And now we're going to go to break, and let me tell you how it works. If you'd like to share poems, oops, that's the wrong one. There we go. If you'd like to share poems for the open lines, first email the poem if you haven't yet to openmic, that's openmic@rattle.com, then call in over Skype or the phone to read. Over the phone, the number is 818-850-7727. Just call, let it ring a few times, then hang up. and I'll call you back when the time is right, within about an hour. If you'd like to join us over Skype, over video, that's the video option, just send me a chat message. I'm at Rattle Poetry, all one word. Just send me a chat message, say hi, I'd like to share a poem, and I will call you when it's your turn. Pick one or the other, not both, because otherwise I'll call you twice, and then you'll be like, oh, you just talked to me 5 minutes ago, which is fine too, but just do one or the other, whichever you'd prefer. And I'll be right back after I stand up and stretch and get everything organized. See you in a minute. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Let me stand up and stretch a little bit. It's a long time to be sitting still, so you should probably stand up and stretch too if you haven't been walking around while listening to this podcast. Now, the prompt for this week was write a poem about the winter solstice. And I have a sort of maybe a first draft of a poem, or an early draft of something. I think I might work on it later today a little bit. I didn't have a whole lot of time this morning, but here we go with my little poem. This is a few lines for solstice. I wonder how this sounds. A few lines for solstice. We wander the dark like stars, unable to fill the void with our brightness. Even Orion's lost his way, imaginary bow in hand, but the dog star follows. So light your distant lights, sing your oldest songs, forgive the earth forever tipping. That is my little poem for the solstice. Megan didn't have one this week, so and let's go to the open lines and see what you have for your poems. If you want to share anything, once again, you can share. I should have said this before, but you can share anything you want. You can share recently published poems if you'd like. You can share prompt poems about the winter solstice, which was a couple days ago, of course. Or you could share Poet Respond poems, just anything you like. So feel free to share anything. And let's, who should we go to first? Let's go to, and we have a first-time caller, but we'll do that later. We always like to do the first-time callers a little later so you can see how it goes. Let's do Angela Gardner first. Angela hasn't been on in a while. I think the earlier time might not be as good for her as the later time that used to be. Hey, Angela, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah. Are you seeing me? I hope you're not seeing me.
No, I'm not. Good to hear you, I should say. It was a euphemism.
Yeah.
So what do you want to share today?
I was going to share my Poets Respond poem from this week, Brushing the Center of the Solar System.
So do you want to describe a little bit what it was about?
Yeah, so basically, there's been a lot of explorations in here. I just want to make sure I didn't exit you out. Sorry.
Oh, no
I was hearing you. Okay.
Okay.
There's been a lot of space explorations, but one of the things is that the probe I thought went in April, but they finally got the data back. But basically it's not, they in quotes touch the sun, but they kind of touch the outer atmosphere. And it's funny because, I feel like as a kids and even me, like, we're always adding a sun to our paper, right? When we're drawing. So, I was thinking about it, and I talked to my son about it. I'm like, hey, like, they touch the sun. And he's like, that's impossible. And I'm like, I know it feels like it would be impossible to touch the sun. So I just kind of did this little poem. It's more the outer atmosphere, but to even get that close is an accomplishment. So
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing. My Sciku lesson was about that because it's really just amazing to see that we could get that close even.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the one cool thing about this year, with all the COVID stuff, I just feel like, I've actually gotten more into space and stuff, maybe just because we want to be, out off this planet a little bit. So it's kind of nice to like follow all the space stuff that's going on.
Yeah, well, let's hear this. Brushing the center of the solar system. I'll put it up.
Okay. My son added a big yellow ball to construction paper with happy beams. Did I teach him that it's really a star? He asked once why it dips in the sea. It's a heavenly body, like a god I've been taught to worship as a child. It was happiness peeking out of the clouds and brings seasonal sadness when it hides. It can be far away, but close at times. Look once and it sets fire to your eyes. I had wished to reach it, feel the gleam, to ride past on a spaceship as it shines east, and see the heat splashes rise off its sides. I looked at the sun I drew being touched by the probe. We wondered why it didn't burn. But the metal didn't melt or disappear. Science tapped its flaming shoulder to ask if we can be friends for another 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that topic, and it's such an important probe too because there's mysteries. We don't understand why it's so hot there, which is just a fascinating thing to think about. Like I think it's 7 million degrees Celsius there at the edge of the Earth, the solar corona, but then the sun itself is only like 10,000 degrees, if I'm remembering right, something like that. So it's very sort of, I don't know, it's an odd sort of magnetic thing going on, I think, but fascinating to be, at the cutting edge of research.
Yeah, and I just think the sun has always fascinated everyone because it brings so many emotions when you look at it, or try not to look at it. You're not supposed to look at it, but it brings, it's such a big part of our lives. It really is the center of our world, obviously, but in so many ways.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that poem. A great poem and a great topic to be talking about. Thanks, Angela. Always great to hear from you.
Oh, you too. Have a great day.
Yep, you too. Bye.
Bye.
It was Angela Gartner with Brushing the Center of the Solar System. Let's go to Nivedita Karthik because it's late there in India. And then we'll go to Caitlin Buxbaum. We'll hit up Dick Westheimer. We'll do Spartacus, Bev Wendell, Atherstone, Zachary Honeycutt's here, Philip Stern, Mike Bales. So we got a good lineup here in the open lines. Let's go to Nivedita Karthik first.
Hello.
Hey, good evening, Nivi. How you doing today?
Hey, Tim. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. Oop, let me fix this size. Sit still. Okay. So, the thing with if people don't know, the thing with the stream the way we do it is that everybody has different bandwidth, so we have to change the sizes all the time, and every time it changes, you have to adjust. Okay, there we go. So you have two poems for us as always, two short poems, and we have the winter solstice up now. So do you want to do that one first?
Sure.
Okay.
Winter solstice. Dusk gives way to night that breaks to dawn at last. Solstice crescendo. Icicles hang like baubles on the tree, and clumps of snow form a festive garland. Nature has curated a playlist specially for us to waltz and glide along the frozen lake, while our shadows keep pace with us under the light of the aubrey moon this long winter night. Winter solstice is the time to create memories and dreams while waltzing along through the ice and snow. All too soon, the moon touches the sun, tentatively, under the glimmer of a million stars. Then, the sun turns round to greet the day as earth and sky merge to one reddish pink ombre palette. Darkest and longest though this night of the year may be, it still sees a new day coming out of the shadows.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was winter solstice. And I was actually wondering, like, what is there a holiday in India that sort of covers that darkest day of the year type thing? No?
No, nothing of the sort.
Does anyone recognize it as like a significant day, or is it just like a
I mean, in India,
scientific?
solstice is not even a big deal. Neither the
Yeah.
summer nor the winter solstice. It's just another day of the year here for us. So it's not even something special. Like you go around asking, I don't think many people are even going to be like, oh, like that's a thing. So it's not something. Oh yeah, the day is there, the night is there. That's just how it goes here. It's another day of the year, just like anything else.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know because the seasons are sort of right. Are there traditionally are there 4 seasons in India? Is that no? Is there a certain number?
No, so okay, I think most of India usually has just one season. Sometimes if you're lucky, you get two. So the season in India is hot and hotter. And during winter, if you live up north, it can get cold.
Mm-hmm.
Like, by no means is it the standard of cold that probably people in the UK or you guys in the US experience. Like, up north, yes, we do have hill stations that get snow. Yes, India does see snow, but it's in very few pockets. But for the most part, about 75% of India, it's just one season. It's hot and then it gets hotter and hottest and then back to hot. So, like right now, I was in Delhi all along, but now I'm back home in Madras. So, here the temperature right now is 20 degrees. It's 12:10 a.m. and it's 20 degrees. So, this probably this is about as cool as it gets here. Anything beyond this is warm and warmer and hot. So no, there's no the traditional 4 seasons does not apply here in India.
Yeah, well, it's 20 degrees here, but 20 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's quite a difference from Celsius.
It's a lot different.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so let's hear the other poem that you have. This is a Rooter story. The poets respond. A fun one is always elephant Santas pass out face masks, hand gel in Thai school tradition. So can you tell a little about that?
So Thailand, though being a mainly Buddhist country, they still celebrate the end of the year season, as they like to call it. And this story actually happens in Ayutthaya, which is a sort of popular Thai tourist destination. So it's something that happens not every year. I mean, the last 2 years they've had to cancel it, obviously, COVID and all that. So this year, I think they sort of got the tradition back, and all the children at school were just so excited. I mean, there's a video that you can see later, and when you scroll down the news story, there are images that show what the elephant actually looks like. And well, it's just really cool. And this year, I think the gifts were more on the lines of face masks and hand sanitizers and things like that, just to spread more awareness of the sort of precautions we should be taking. But hey, Santa doesn't just always have to give toys and presents. This is the most important gift I think that Santa can give us this year to help us keep safe. So it's just a fun story to see. I mean, elephants as Santa Claus in a Buddhist country that actually celebrates Christmas it's not something you hear about every day. So I was like, why not? Saint Nick doesn't just have to be a person.
Yeah, well, I showed a little bit of the video so people could see, and they even had the Santa, the beards on things. That was really fun to see. Okay, so
and sometimes they even have they custom make the suit for the elephant. So I don't think it happened this year, but sometimes they do get a sort of red, I think it's a blanket or something, so they just drape it over the elephant. So the Santa does still have a red suit, like how we expect Santa to look like. So
that's fun. Well, let's hear the poem. I have that up.
Pachyderms with presents. With his red suit and round belly, he's here in a scene straight from the telly. The children laugh and clap for joy at the thought of getting a new toy. But this year, Santa's not giving toys. No, no, no. Instead, he's educating all the girls and boys on the importance of washing their hands and wearing masks in terms that they actually understand. At long last, here he comes. Santa Claus is finally in town. But this Santa in a red suit is different, you see, for he has no sleigh and definitely can't ski. His trunk is not stuffed with goodies galore, and his elves are not knee-high to the floor. Oh no, this Santa and his elves are much taller than your average Christmas tree. This roly-jolly Santa lives in warmer climes and gives Saint Nick a break during these tough times. Never expects anything in return, except maybe some sugarcane and yummy grass ferns. Have you had a chance to meet these pachyderm present givers yet?
That was great. Very fun poem and fun topic as always. Thanks so much, Nivi.
Thank you, Tim. It's lovely talking to you too. Hope you have had a nice Christmas and have a great New Year.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thank you.
It's Nivi Karthik with two poems of pachyderms with presents, the most recent one. So let's go to Mike Bales, and then let's go to Caitlin, and yeah, let's do that. Mike Bales.
Get away from the phone. So far, it's been an excellent broadcast today.
Yeah, it has. A great guest. I was looking forward to this for a long time because I've been asking him to be on the show, and we keep being like, "When's your book coming out?" And he keep being like, "It'll be out in a couple months." And that was like a year and a half or so ago. I started asking him, so it's great to finally get him on. So Mike, what do you have to share with us today?
Could I do both poems?
Yeah, sure. I have The Other Side of the Door. Did you email both? Let me see.
The other's on is on the submission manager.
Sure. Well, let's start with The Other Side of the Door, and then we'll do the other. Actually, let's start with the Poets Respond poem. So
I'll be glad to.
Yeah. So what was the Poets Respond poem about?
Well, I know you're a little weary about COVID. Everyone is, but this is kind of a happy thing about it, where they found music can be therapy for people with COVID, and there's a lot of joy in the coverage. I read about it in different sources. I didn't know what exactly to put down, as the email connection, but I heard about it in different places. And this poem is called Measures of Song and Breath. iPad in hand as the nurse stands under a light. Music plays and the patient struggles to breathe. His wife stands outside the third floor window and waves while he can only watch. He sings along as the music plays, and as if in therapy, stretches his lungs. And in time, he hopes to dance. Refrains of Don't Stop Believin' and Here Comes the Sun play to ease breathing, and the isolation felt as they take on new meanings. Somewhere else, nurses and staff sing as a COVID survivor is wheeled to the front door, while elsewhere and piped into hospital rooms, Dolly Parton and 1,000 virtual singers share songs to spread a sense of joy as patients are given a second chance to live their lives.
Yeah, great poem, and a good thing to point out the measures of song and breath. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Yeah, you should have seen this one video. It's amazing. A patient is being wheeled down a hallway and zoom out towards the front door, and he had a bag in his hand, and everyone was just cheering. The hallways of people that, and he got to this one thing, and people started singing, and after a little while, I realized they were singing "Don't Stop Believin'."
Yeah, that's excellent. And so the other poem you have is On the Other Side of the Door. So do you want to explain a little bit about this one?
Well, I'm thrilled. It came out last summer, but I didn't realize till later, and I just got the copy of the magazine. It's called Star Poets. It's a nice editor out of Wisconsin who publishes me and asks for poems. And I've loved working in Wisconsin as a flagger. I've seen Sturgeon Bay and Door County one time when I was in Wisconsin for a weekend and had a day off, but I've also worked around there. My last assignment was by Whitefish Bay, and as we were leaving the work site, the last thing I saw when I was leaving my last assignment, I looked over my shoulder and I saw Lake Michigan. Door County is Wisconsin between Green Bay and Lake Michigan. Another story is north of it is there's a strait that goes from Green Bay into Lake Michigan,
Oh,
and
yeah.
its waters are very turbulent and dangerous because Green Bay's waters are 10 degrees warmer than Lake Michigan.
Oh, interesting.
So
yeah.
it's pretty much about me being up in Door County. And Door has kind of two meanings for this poem, which I hope the listeners hear. And it's called On the Other Side of the Door. Tell me if and when the lakes swell between the trees whisper secrets in soft winds of this other life. Seagulls circle and fly over reflections of sun on waters. Sands and beaches shift in the swell, barefoot lovers stroll. A badger runs for cover, something discovered in thin strands of thin-skinned ash surrounding enclaves where residents live hidden lives. Two highways diverge and meet again at death's door where turbulent waters meet. Tourists and glass-bottom boats seek remains of a native fleet. Yet in Sturgeon Bay another ship is born, ribs of steel to bear winds and waves. History is told find new life at the Maritime Museum as fireboats on display in the Channel Bob. The curator dusts shelves as a toddler looks at picture books and gasps as parents watch. The night unwinds with another story, and if you read between the lines, a love poem unfolds, words extending past their time.
Excellent. That was great. Thanks for sharing that. That was, what was that called again? On the Other Side of the Door by Mike Bales. Thanks so much, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Okay, thanks. It's a good show today.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good day. Okay, and now let's go to, who did I say was next? Let's go to Caitlin Bucksbaum.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Caitlin. How you doing today?
Pretty good. I had my video off because... Oh, hold on. I thought I muted. Oh,
No problem.
that way. Yeah, for reasons. Yeah, sorry I missed you guys last week. That was kind of a bummer. I had intended to be here and wasn't. And now I have too many poems that I want to read, but that's okay.
So what do you want to read?
I want to read the one that I attached to the email
Mm-hmm.
first, and then a really short one from the link.
Okay, this is Everything is Interesting?
Yeah, so first I just want to say that I loved Jose's interview. I hadn't, heard him talk before. I obviously have seen his poems in Rattle, but yeah, really enjoyed that. And I think he said the phrase "everything is interesting" at some point, and that's what made me think of this poem. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll read that.
He did, yeah. Yeah. He's a great guy. He's one of those poets. I don't know. There's so many poets out there who deserve more attention than I think they get. And so hopefully with a book out now, Tony will get the attention that his work deserves. It's really good stuff, just consistently.
And also just a really interesting person. I mean, also loved the Alaska shout out. That's cool that he was there. And this poem, I think I wrote while just on a walk somewhere. And so it makes me think of Alaska. And there's also a phrase in there, but I'll get to that in a second. So I'll just read it.
Okay, go ahead.
And this is from Interstitials, my last book of poetry. Everything is interesting. Everything is interesting. Watching a bird gliding in flight, listening to a kid cry and echo itself, not knowing if it's animal or human. Smelling diesel in the brisk autumn air, biting at your cheeks that redden in the waning sun, rising wind. These are the signs of the living, the created in creation, interested in everything, separate but equal in the most joyous way. A part of it all.
Excellent. Everything is Interesting by Caitlin M.S. Bucksbaum. Yeah.
And I wanted to highlight that separate but equal because it was interesting to me because Tony talked a lot about reclaiming words and things like that, and I think that phrase is maybe calls things to mind that are uncomfortable. And I think, and of course I didn't intend that exactly, but that's kind of what I was feeling at the time. Like, I'm using this phrase and I'm feeling like finally it's for a good reason, not for something historically. So I don't know if how people feel about that, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that comes through for sure. And then you sent a link to Press Pause Press.
Yeah, so that's the first time I've been published by them. They've got a long turnaround once they send out acceptances, because I think this was accepted in like March and it came out in November. But it's a really cool little press. They do online and in print, and they don't have social media accounts because their goal is to kind of stay away from that and be more in reality than cyberspace, I guess, which is kind of ironic because I found them online and I mentioned that in my submission. It's like, hey, I realize that this is kind of weird, but also I have it's hard for me in Alaska to connect with people. So
yeah, I saw that, and I like the tagline. We just looked at the website. It was it's noisy out there, which it really is noisy out there on the internet.
Mm-hmm. And so the poems that I submitted here are kind of social media-y, but I was just going to read the first one, the American sentence.
Sure.
Chilly evenings darken with your scrolling. What are you looking for?
It's a great American sentence and a great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that form is, for people who don't know the American sentence, it's 17 syllables, one single sentence, which was the Allen Ginsberg sort of Americanization of a haiku is his idea of it. Yeah, that's a really good one. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thanks. And I want to encourage people to read there's two other poems in that, but I won't read them. I'll let other people navigate there. And it's funny because there's a movie called Don't Look Up that just came out on Netflix on Christmas Eve, and my second poem in there is called Look Up. And maybe if people have seen the movie or watched the movie and then read this, they'll be like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Especially because I wrote this a long time before that, but whatever.
Yeah, well, everyone have to check that out. Thanks so much, Caitlin.
Yeah.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.
It was Caitlin Bucksbaum with two poems, and you can find the other ones here at presspausepress.org. Okay, so let's go to another caller, and let's go to Philip Stern.
Hello.
Hey, Philip. How you doing today?
Good. Let me mute you.
Yeah, no problem.
There we go. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so it looks like you have a solstice poem for us today.
I do. It's taking off from it, actually. But my son is coming in from Wisconsin with part of his family this week, and so that was on my mind. And in the poem, actually, when he was born, many doctors did not allow, didn't permit husbands in the delivery room.
Mm-hmm.
So that explains part of the poem. And I never got to see my daughter being born. But at any rate, I plan to surprise him, I think, with this poem when he comes in on Wednesday.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you can come visit and you can share this with him. Go ahead. Whenever you're ready, I have it.
Okay. The shortest day. You were quite a surprise. You came 2 weeks early, and the doctor had said you would be a sister, a birth I was not permitted to see. So when you emerged, there I was shouting, "It's a boy, it's a boy," on the shortest day of my life. We had slept late. We were in the supermarket in the afternoon when your mother said, "Get me to the hospital now." No time for an epidural. You only took an hour to arrive, pink and squawking, complaining, I suppose, about the cold air. Who could blame you? You've breathed much cold and warm air since. You're 44 now. I stayed 5 hours while your mother slept. She did the hard work, but I was exhausted. I drove to the store to exchange the pink sheets and blanket. Not anything I could do about the pink walls. I fell asleep at 8. You and I have seen many beautiful, many long days since, but I will never forget your arrival on that shortest day, my winter solstice in June.
Oh, that was great. Phillips, an excellent poem. That was The Shortest Day. And just
Thank
great,
you.
great, bring that memory to life. And of course, parents all thinking about their own memories too, I'm sure, as you read that poem, because that's what was coming back to me when our two kids were born. Thanks for sharing that, Philip.
Thank you for allowing me to do it. By the way, great discussion today. I loved it.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm so glad you could listen and join us. It's always such fun.
Yeah. Yes, thanks.
Take care, and have a good visit with your family, too.
You too, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
There's Philip Stern with The Shortest Day. Let's see, we have Julian Matthews will be coming up to Spartacus. Let's do Spartacus.
Hello.
Hey, Spartacus, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and you think?
And so what do you have that you would like to share with us?
I've got something about the solstice, a light poem today.
Excellent. Okay, let me pull it up. Where did it go? There we go. Okay, it's ready whenever you are, so go ahead.
Mm-hmm. In my winter solstice dream, we are here for you, 7 small ugly goblins say, with red, bright Santa's hats as they enter my cold room. Their high-pitched voice resonates well, while my Christmas tree stands silent next to a desk. On the floor, a small coin that was tossed in the air makes my nightmares longer in the northern hemisphere. Outside, a pale moon is attached to a huge crane, and the flowers enjoy their shower as they listen to the rain. Hello, you were not invited, I say, shaking to them. Don't cut down my little tree, causing mayhem again. I'm feeling anxious. I am feeling afraid. Being carried on their shoulders for a sacrificial end. When I open my eyes, it's boiling hot. The longest day of my year has been finally brought.
Excellent poem, Spartacus. Thanks so much for sharing that. In my winter solstice dream. Excellent images throughout.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye. There's a Spartacus Anagnosterus with In My Winter Solstice's Dream. And let's go next to go down toward the earlier. Let's go to Bev Wendell Atherstone. Hey, Bev, how are you doing today?
Hey, how are you, Tim?
I'm great. It's a fun show so far. Looking forward to more poems still. What do you have to share?
Yes, I have 2 poems. One in relation to the news clip, and one about the solstice.
Great. Well, let's see. Let's do the. I have endangered giraffes right now. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Do you have a picture from the news article I sent you to put on the screen?
Let's see.
Because there was a photo in that.
Did you submit it? Because the email doesn't have. Okay, let me pull up the submission because that'll have the link. So give me 1 second.
Yeah, and I'll give a little background on it while you search for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So about a week ago, there was an article in the news about giraffe in northern Kenya who basically not only starved to death but died of dehydration.
Oh wow!
Because there was the rains didn't appear this year, so there's a normal cycle of rains and they just did not come, and so all the watering holes dried up. But even worse for the giraffes is that the leaves on the acacia trees where they feed dried up, and they get most of their moisture from the leaves. So there was a picture. I don't know if you found it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
In
such
the
a
article.
such a sad photograph. And then the second one too. You can see how sort of
Yes,
flattened they are. I mean, for lack of a better word, that's
yes,
just so sad.
yes. They're so emaciated. So my poem is about that. And it made me start thinking about giraffes as a species and how, although they're just so incredible, how they are not really given the place they should be given in terms of African wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll read my poem.
Yeah, go ahead.
Endangered giraffes. Reticulated giraffe, Giraffa reticulata, with bodies seemingly cut from brown brick buildings, stretch ever higher to nibble leaves from tall acacia trees, tonguing carefully to avoid darning needle spines. When startled into flight, they canter in a floating ballet, legs suspended, neck impossibly undulating, serpentine.
Uh-oh, he's still there?
Yep, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Never part of Africa's Big Five safari trophy hunts in the past 200 years has not kept their numbers from dwindling, nor has been viewed as tall curiosities with two knobby ossicones between their ears, nor have they been valued when their long neck nerve was used by evolutionists to disprove creationist theories. Oblivious of human views, these guileless, I'm sorry.
No problem.
The Goliath bachelors, looming over 5 meters tall and weighing up to 2 tons each, seek out their delicate 1-ton future mates. When these are found, ferocious neck-jousting bouts between bulls revive age-old rights. Soon, their perfect miniatures, inscribed with their tribe's ancient DNA, careen in each cow's womb. Surviving 7 million years has made this species hardy, gleaning most of their water from their tree canopy diet of xerophytes. They survive even in Kenya's arid north. But this year's mist rains pushed past their drought-hardened limit. Just days ago, venturing to slake their thirst, a herd of 6 dehydrated Somalia giraffe became mired in mud, weak and starving, incapable of pulling themselves free. They succumbed just meters from a pond. Endeavoring to protect their own dwindling water supply from contamination, nearby Irib villagers moved the emaciated bodies. Randomly arrayed, these decomposing behemoths seemed to be spiraling, eerily reminiscent of their extant floating strides.
Yeah,
and I think you can see that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Just such a striking image and great details about the giraffes that I didn't know so much about. I when you said that they're not appreciated, I thought, well, everybody loves giraffes, but then there's so much that I didn't know that you were sharing there as you were reading that poem. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, and then I have the winter solstice one.
Yeah, sure. Let me pull that up really quick. There it is. Okay, yep, go ahead whenever you're ready. I have this too.
Thanks. Did you find it?
Yep, I do. Go ahead. Whenever you're ready, it's up for
Thank
everybody
you.
at home. Yeah.
Our winter solstice 2021. The shortest day, the longest night. For lovers, a delight. Across an endless sky traverse the constellations bright, as Earth's sisters stretch to align. Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus dance along their ecliptic plane, once again, as in every 20 years, the great conjunction of brilliant Jupiter with distant Saturn appears. Perhaps this meeting of these gaseous giants depicts that ancient Christmas star, visible once again tonight.
Oh, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Bev. Great poem.
Thank you so much, and so sorry about the interruptions with the phone on the other line.
No problem. It happens. It happens. Live radio or whatever. Yeah, but thanks. It's always a pleasure, Bev.
And thank you. Today's interview was just magnificent. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Let's go to Julian Matthews, because he just called in, and I'm not sure if he's up late or it's a tough time for him now. I think I'm not sure what time it is there, in Indonesia. Hey, Julian, it's great to see you. How you doing today?
Hi, Tim. Good to see you too. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you. And what time is it there?
It's 3:09 a.m.
Yeah, I thought so. So are you up late or are you up early?
Yeah, I'm up late just for the show.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks so much. And sorry for the time isn't good. I mean, with the move to this morning. But I'm so glad you could still join sometimes anyway. It's great.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
So what is it? This is I am not an Xmas tree. Is there anything you want to say about it to start?
Just missing my two children who are not able to be with us for the second time in 2 years. Yeah.
Is it because of just being safe, or is it because of actual travel restrictions?
A bit of both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, go ahead whenever you're ready. I have it up.
I'm not an Xmas tree. I'm not a Christmas tree to be pulled out of storage once a year, trussed up and encircled with blinking lights, decorated with baubles, ball ornaments, cheap glitter, and plastic pine cones. But some days, I do want to be your Christmas tree, on a platform or a stage, all lit, your glowing presence at my feet. I'm not a snowman with a carrot nose, hollows for eyes, twigs for hands. Your snowball target eventually melting and forgotten. But some days I wish I could be rolled up in your warm hands, shaped anew, my poker smile peeking through your morning window, tipping my borrowed hat as you pass by. I'm not a Santa Claus, a parent disguised as your benefactor with a fake white beard, a pillow for a paunch, your corner bell clanger, your mall knee warmer with a dyed red suit and wind-up repetitive ho, ho, ho. But some nights I dream of coming down your chimney, waking you up, introducing you to Dasher and Prancer, Cupid and Comet, Rudolph with his shiny snout. I'd wink, fulfill your wish, and take you on a sleigh ride across the twinkling night sky and make you laugh out loud, genuinely, like you used to. I'm not your unwrapped gift. I'm not your mistletoe or the kiss under it. I'm not your spiked eggnog. I'm not your fruitcake. I'm not your cookie. I'm not your seasonal representation of superficiality or passing fancy. I'm your emptied gift box. I'm your heartache of loss and regret. I'm your tired cliche of wants and needs. Your missing guest, the knock on the door that you long for, which never comes. You were my child in a manger, my living star, my wise princess, my little drummer boy. I'm still in your corner, pining for you, my hope evergreen, for your healing, for my healing. Tinsel in a teardrop, a lone light, always on for you to find your way home.
Beautiful poem. Very, very touching. Thanks for sharing that, Julian. It's always great to hear you and get to share these poems. Just wonderful stuff, and hope you get to see your family soon.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, have a good night and get some rest. But there's a Julian Matthews, and Julian, we'll make sure to, if you call in on these earlier broadcasts, I'll make sure to do you first round like we try to do with Nivi, because it's late there too. Okay, now let's go next to, we have a first-time caller, so I'm just going to remind the first-time caller at this 631 number, if we get that to work, that I'm going to call you, and it's going to be a little bit in the future, so make sure you turn off your broadcast so you don't have the two sounds in your ear at the same time. And also have the poem in front of you ready to read, so that when you read it, you'll be able to read it. Because if it's on the screen with a delay, you're not at the same time as the poem. So you have to have the poem handy yourself. So just talk to me on the phone and have the poem in front of you. But we'll call the 631 number next. But first, let's go to Zachary Honeycutt. Hey, Zachary, how you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Merry Christmas, Tim.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, too. So what was it that you would like to share?
Yeah, I'd like to share my Aprastic Challenge poem from a few months ago, actually, before the new year starts. The one that was the picture with the boat where the dam looked like it was breaking in the background, and there were like all the people in the water, floating in the water.
Which one was that? I'm trying to pull up the picture. The dam.
It was like, I think September maybe, or October.
Because the titles, I have them listed by titles, and the titles aren't help me out here. Let's see, was it Rosetta Stone? Was it
There's like a big, it looks like an arc, and there's a water coming out of like a dam, and there's like a bunch of things underwater.
Are they like floating with dolls and things? The Rosetta Stone?
Maybe that's it.
Okay,
yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, yeah. So this was Rosetta Stone, by Emily Rankin, right? Yeah, by Emily Rankin. So this is the picture here we have up. So what was it about this image in particular that made you want to write a poem about it?
It just, I kind of got like a Noah's Ark vibe in my head, and just like since you know that I'm a Christian, I'm like really into creationism, and like I believe that God created the world. And so I've written poems in the past where I've like wrote about my stance. And like there's times where like I have like friends and just people that I know that believe in evolution, and like in the past I've used to like debate with them and things. And so this kind of is along those lines. This poem kind of, I think, encapsulates the idea of kind of like how easily in our lives and in the world, how things could kind of just go wrong, and how, like, you know, it's almost like there is a supreme being that is keeping everything in order, and how easy it would be, like if God just didn't want to anymore, how easy it would be, and really just how, I suppose, maybe grateful we should be that there is a God that created the world and keeps everything, you know, keeps everything from going bad, I suppose.
Yeah.
The poem kind of says it better than what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Yeah, I think it was all the time, because human history is a history of catastrophe, really, of various kinds. And the Noah's Ark story is such a universal, just because there's disasters everywhere. But go ahead. The dam could break whenever you're ready.
Yeah, and this is kind of, it sounds like dark what I'm saying, but it kind of, like, the end of this poem is kind of pretty in its own way, like if you think about it. But yeah, so I'm going to read this. So this is called The Dam Could Break. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. That's what the psalmist said. He saw God's glory everywhere, in all the heavens and underneath the azure sky, in the beauty of what he could grasp with his mind and his hands. He saw God's character in his laws. The dam could break. Where would we be? Overgrown children drowned at sea. They found instructions on a clay tablet in Iraq on how to load the animals 2 by 2 onto a vessel. Plans to make a ship 2/3 larger than a soccer field, but that's not enough. It's not enough that the Earth is 93 million miles away from the sun, rounded up, or that the moon, no God, holds the waters at bay, or that our planet has water to keep man and beast alive, or that we're born with organs that allow us to reproduce, or that many other cultures have a flood story too. Yes, the dam could break. Where would we be? Perhaps the fossil record, parts of the sediment of decomposing animals and plants. People look ahead to nuclear missiles and miss an earthquake in Haiti. They don't see the meteor until after it hits. People impatient for the end forget about God's patience for the beginning, of their understanding, of their heart for him, of their faith in him. The dam could break. Where would we be? People are so dead, set on the wrath of man, but they've overlooked the wrath of God. No, they've overlooked his mercy.
Hey, great. Thanks for sharing that. And that was The Dam Could Break, the Ekphrastic Challenge poem from September. Thanks for sharing that, Zachary.
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quick, next week I'm going to read one of them. I got an early Christmas gift from Warp 10. I got 2 more poems published on Warp 10 Literary Magazine's website.
Oh, very cool. I'm looking forward to those. I really do love that Warp 10 and the science fiction poetry stuff they do.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I got these are kind of I would consider these horror science fiction poems, but they're very fun. One of them's called Dead Cow, and because it's science fiction and it's about dead cows, I think you can kind of put 2 and 2 together with what's going on in that poem. And the other one is a really cool sonnet called Thunderbird, and I think you'd appreciate that, Tim, because you probably know what a Thunderbird is. You live. And so I just want to tell you guys, if you want to check that out all next week, it's on the front page under the Captain's Log, Warp 10 Literary Magazine, and I'd like to read at least one of them. Maybe you guys can, if you guys like them, you can tell me which one to read, because I don't know, but I'm going to read one or the other. One's a free verse and one's a sonnet, so look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too, Zachary. Thanks so much.
Yeah, have a nice Christmas, Tim.
You too. It was Zachary Honeycutt with I lost it. Oh yeah, the A Dam Breaks. And let's go to this first time caller, the 631 number, and see who that is.
Hello.
Hey, this is Tim from Rattle, and you are live on the air. Who am I talking to?
Oh, Janet Hiller. Hi.
Hey, yeah, how you doing?
Great. Thank you so much. I love the broadcast. I love listening to Alcántara. He was great.
Yeah.
Wonderful interview.
Yeah,
Wonderful interview.
I love doing these shows too. So what do you want to share?
Well, it was the poem that I sent for the news this week, which is about a incident that happened actually 2 years ago, but the perpetrator was finally agreed to a plea deal, and it was very upsetting to me, and I immediately wanted to write about it because I find that I write when things move me, and I usually when I'm upset about something and it's meaningful to me, so I assume it's going to be meaningful to others. So it's entitled Another Hate Crime, which is what it's about.
Here, let me give me a second to pull this up on Poetry Spawn. Just 1 second. There we go. Okay. So go ahead whenever you're ready. I have it ready for you.
Okay. Today, the judge and lawyers made a final deal. A felon, he may never own a firearm. 5 months in the county jail. 5 years of probation. Curfew. Drug test. Scrutiny. Service to the community. therapy. The colors of the swastikas he painted were scrubbed from all the temple walls, where shades of hate reverberated, breaking open clots that formed from bleeding history. He offers an apology. He says, "I'm sorry," to his mom and the community. Another dandelion seed is catapulted by the breeze into a hazy sky and flashes in the shaky sun until it lands on moistened earth to bring forth roots and leaves. We'll use for tea that calms and clots the bleeding. History bandaged with a hope we swallow to forgive, but not forget.
Yeah, excellent poem, Janet. Thanks so much for calling in and sharing that. Another hate crime. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good day.
You too.
Yep. That was Janet H. Let me add Janet to our call list so we know who that is next time. Here we go. And next up, oops. There we go. And next up, let's go to Richard Westheimer. Hello, Richard. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tim. I'm so grateful that you do these every week. And it's so grateful for the people who gather and read and listen and make comments on YouTube. I know you probably have a hard time keeping up with all the back and forth on YouTube, but there's a lot
I
of...
do, but I definitely love it. And I feel if I skipped a week, I've done that before, it just feels wrong. Like I feel like I'm missing something. And then with 2 weeks going by between them, I forget how to do everything.
Right.
So I gotta stay on the routine.
Right.
But so what do you want to share today, Richard?
Well, I'll start. Time I'll do the one of my.
Oh, I think we lost your audio. Are you there? Let's see. I'm going to hang up and call you back because we have your video still, but your audio is not on mute, but there's no sound. That's never happened before. Let me hang up and call him back. Maybe something. Let's see. Let's see. Is it going to work now? Hey, Dick, are you there? That's strange. Yeah, I'm not getting anything this time. So I'm gonna try do a couple more callers and I'll try to get back to you, Dick. Hopefully we can. Let's see. Oh, Joey Stahl. We have I don't know what was happening. We had the video. The video looked fine, but then the sound disappeared. Okay, let's call up Joy.
Hello.
Hey, Joy. How you doing today?
All right.
So I think you have a solstice poem for us. Is that the one you wanted to share?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. And is there anything you want to add or explain about it?
Oh, just another last minute finishing.
Yep, same
this
here.
is very, very raw.
Okay, well, go ahead whenever you're ready. I have it.
All right. The longest night. Every planet has a winter solstice, driven by a planet's tilt and orbit around its star. The instant the sphere's northern pole is aimed farthest away from the star. Many cultures celebrate that moment or celebrate to ignore the bad things that lurk in the darkness of the longest night. During the advent of the event, I dislike waking in darkness, needing morning light like caffeine. The shortest day of the year ticks away into the past. I celebrate the moment, longing for increased light that will not arrive for weeks. I try not to dwell in darkness or linger in the past that seems unavoidable on this night. I wake before dawn, although the clock and cats insist it is the time to be alert and commence the day, longing for the upcoming equinox when the planet rights itself for just a moment, and equal day and night signal the arrival of spring.
Excellent solstice poem. And that was The Longest Night by Joy Sell. Thanks so much, Joy.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Richard's back with a problem solved. Let's get back to Richard. Hey, Richard, we got sound again.
Good.
We've got video. We're looking good.
Good.
Yeah. Do you have sound also?
We do, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Yeah. So somehow my auxiliary mic just started causing my system to go all crazy. So I quit, unplugged the mic, and here I am back again.
Yeah, those auxiliary mics are trouble. We used to do the interviews with handheld digital recorders that we would print, and I had lapel mics that would help the audio be better, so we could save the audio. If the batteries run out and they don't tell you, like there's no warning, and so a couple times and so one time we stopped doing that. Like no more external microphones.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate I do appreciate that you keep taking these steps with technological things that can connect us. I know it complicates your life tremendously, but
yeah, well, I like, I don't know. I wonder if I'm at the age now where I'm starting to not want to, because there are some, like some magazines are starting to do like NFT things, and I don't know. I just don't feel like dealing with that yet. But this is just connecting with people. It's such just a fun thing to do, and I would have done it sooner if we had a better internet connection where I live. It took a while for us to have the bandwidth to do a show, but
yeah, when we got fiber out here in the country just before the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
Yay.
I know. It's amazing the difference it makes. Like we used to have, it was just through the phone lines, and we have these old like 1950s phone lines, and the squirrels would run along them, and the power, they just go out, and it was a nightmare. And now it's just heaven from working at home anyway. So what did you want to share today, Richard?
So I'll read my poem Launch Team, which was a poet's respond to sort of reading about all the anxiety that the scientists and team and people like me were feeling before yesterday's launch of the James Webb telescope, and are still feeling and will feel for the next 30 days until all of those instruments unfurl. And
yeah, it's amazing to think of like how much it's like a decade of people's lives, and it
was 1995.
Wow, more than almost 3 decades.
The basic design with the heat shield and the that was all from the 90s.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting writing process, as all these poets respond poems are, where what I discovered in the writing of it was a complete surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what the poem it wants to be about. That'll become apparent as I read it. So, Launch Team. The Webb telescope sits on its launch pad, much as I sat jittery at my boys' school graduation, fumbling with a physics award in my lap, waiting for some ignition sequence to begin. There I sat atop a rocket, clinging to that science prize like a talisman. It was evidence I belonged in the orbit of smart people. But I wound up failing at that, sat in college classes with folks who got vector calculus and Lagrangian mechanics, while I got stoned and fell behind in my studies. I failed out of everything except playing late-night card games and tripping out with folks who were as untethered as I was. Like a misfired satellite, I failed to deploy, failed to power up, failed to find my trajectory. I missed the message from mission control about what procedures to initiate, stuck being an underachiever with a physics prize. I read that Webb is supposed to become something special, but first she must blast off, pull 5 Gs, and I'm afraid that she too might come undone before unfolding, that the fire that's to lift her might consume her. She sits with so much expected of her soon-to-be beautiful being, but unlike me, She'll not get a second chance to unfurl, to become a golden vessel for ancient starlight. I think her NASA parents must be infinitely anxious, worried for her future, and I fear tears well up from some part of me lost long ago in the exosphere. I think of my parents, forlorn as I floated cold in space, and what they said to each other when, after 100 million seconds of crackle and static, that first clear signal returned from so far away.
Yeah, that's excellent, Richard. And a great example of, how to write a poem kind of in the process of that. If the poem, if your poem gives you a door, walk through it. Yes, right?
Well, I walked around in this room a long time before the door became apparent.
Yeah.
Or no pun intended, apparent. There we go.
Yeah, excellent. Do you want to do the solstice poems too?
Yeah, I'll I had 3 of them. I'll pick. I'll just read the last 2, Solstice 2020 and Solstice 2021.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. And were they written each on the solstice, or are this all written right now?
On or about.
Uh-huh.
I went back in my catalog and I just found Solstice 2018, 2019 poems titled as simply as that. And so
Gotcha.
I just
yeah.
dragged them forward. So I'll do 2020 and 2021. Solstice 2020. Winter solstice dusk weeps red into the darkening sky, harbinger of the new year. Winter solstice dawn, a brighter morning than I expected. The old year leaves its dreams behind in a pile of bodies. Solstice 2021. I feel the wind shift, hear the limbs crack. Winter inhales a deep breath that pulls clouds rolling from the north.
Oh, very good. I love that pair of poems. A good contrast between the two. Thanks for sharing those too, Dick.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you so much.
Yep. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. That was Richard Westheimer with Solstice 2020 and 2021, and then the poem Launch Team about the Webb satellite. Is that what's called, the Webb? The James Webb? Is that what it is? Yeah, James Webb Space Telescope. That's the official title of that new satellite, which is going to be replacing Hubble with some amazing photographs. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody who's waiting for me to call. I think we got everybody. Okay, so it's a pretty long-running show today, but that's great. The other nice thing about doing them in the morning for me is I don't have to rush off anywhere most days. Some days I'm going to have to, but it makes it more likely that I don't. So let's share really quickly. We have a couple poems a couple of people asked to read. So let me read. This is Lauren Diaz, The Tip Jar. This is a solstice poem. And here we go. This is, once again, Lauren Dia. See your name there. Lauren Dia with The Tip Jar. Sitting empty at my ankles, I cut the fingers from my glove. The yarn's unwinding, so I bow and pluck and I strum. Stationed on the platform, playing carols, where the trains bustle and bundle families together in a hustle with whispers of, "Do you see Nana?" Shoppers stream past like kings, cross with their queens, weary of this brigade of merry moments lost in the dark, longing for the sun. A lost little boy with cake-crusted fingers lets go the balloon he was clutching, catches something sharp, bursts in perfect pitch. His fit sounds an alarm. I pick up my fiddle and fix to match his tune. His shrikes are sirens' lyrics. The wailing waltz is on. My melody melts down his moans, and he toe-taps along. A grateful father surrenders a quarter quick to clank in my jar. When the wind whirls through, and I stamp my foot in time, my toes uncurl and cross again against the cold I kick. The jar tips, the quarter slips, and in no time is nicked, the tip jar sitting empty at my ankles. There's The Tip Jar by Lauren Dia. Thanks so much for sharing that, Lauren. Great poem. And let's see. So she also mentions, too, this poem doesn't actually mention the solstice, but the scene I see is days before Christmas, and the days are short, and time for shopping and singing and picking up and greeting travelers is running thin. And while kids are excited, adults are stressed out and worn out by this constant joy. Yeah, great poem. Thanks for sharing that, Lauren. And here's Carlton Johnson's poem. Let me see if I can open this. Yeah, there we go. Oh, I don't want to take the tour now. Okay. So this is in a Google Docs, but here we go. Winter can be too much. And this is Carlton Johnson's poem. Here we go. Winter can be too much. Here is a clump of moss, grown solid with ice, frosted with death fingers coiling around the green. The flames of life dwindle, but the embers are still. There in the next place, there is so much more to living, to being in the breath of each moment. Do I have the right to declare my own illness? What measures me against others of the similarity afflicted, similarly neglected? It is a divorce we ask of ourselves, striving to take care of our own bodies, our own minds, own hearts. This is where the breaking, remodeling, remelding occurs. To go beyond the breaking point of life, the water flowing through forests, glens, veins, slowly freeze in tranquil winter. That is Winter Can Be Too Much by Carlton Johnson. And it sounds similar to, or sort of maybe inspired by the today's poem, which is interesting. There's some of the lines, the breaking point and things like that from today's poem, Breaking Point, which we talked to Emily Pickering at the top of the show. So thanks for sharing that, Carlton. And here is, let's just keep this going. We got some stuff to share. Let me, here's Carla Schwartz, who again, the daytime is not as good for her, but here she is with an audio recording. Let's try to play this. And her poem is Winter Solstice. So it's a prompt poem here.
Winter solstice. It's December. Waning light shines through the window. Each day, another minute of daylight swallowed. This year, the shortest day is not the coldest day. The solstice occurs at a time on the clock, 10:30 a.m. this year. Yesterday, the air was so cold my fingers burned. Burning with cold, like burning with passion, only super cold. I felt the burn out on my ride. I had to shake my fingers to stem the pain. December is ending, winter beginning. Now we can count the days forward to lengthening light. Each day grabs another minute of life for itself. Each day grabs another minute of light for itself. This year, I count backward through the shortening too. Yesterday, my dead mother turned 90. My father didn't live to notice. The week before, my live father turned dead. For days prior, death inhabited his live skeleton. For days prior, his live skeleton labored for breath. Breaths whistled through his stiffening lungs. His uvula punched by each intake. In, out, a rattled march. 3 weeks before, my father sat up in his hospice bed. A new arrival, he looked like a plump squirrel. A menu in one hand, he eyed the meal before him. Ghosts visited my father in his dreams. Horrible stories he couldn't repeat. In one dream, he had to replace Placido Domingo. In another, a famous chemistry prof went postal. It was December. The waning light shined through the window. Each day, less and less food for my father. Each day, another minute of daylight. Swallowed.
Next one, that was Carla Schwartz with her poem for this week, Winter Solstice. I'm so glad hopefully it was loud enough for everybody to hear at home. I have to read back. I cranked it up as loud as I could. I think it probably was okay, but that was Winter Solstice by Carla Schwartz. And it's great to have you here, Carla, even though you couldn't make it live at this time. It's really cool to be able to share poems too, so I appreciate that. And of course, you can always find Carla at CB99 Videos. It's CB99 Videos on YouTube and whatnot. And then here we have a poem from Ted Guevara, a short one. This is Solstice's Aim, another prompt poem. Here we go. This is Ted's Solstice's Aim. Should a man reserve all his love for a woman, that one chance he keeps acute in a corner, safe from any doubt he happens to overthink, bare as his cheeks, the wind becomes unruly, defiant in its song. His plan is as old as snow and just as drastic, a prolonged fall. The ungloved hands may be cold, yet veins shimmer under skin. We feel such burn, no winter remains constant, as spring also wants its turn. Great rhyme at the end there. I love that. His plan is as old as snow and just as drastic. Great line there. Thanks for sharing that. That was Solstice's Aim by Ted Bernal Guevara. And I think that's going to be it for... Let me do a random poem. I like doing a random poem as well. Let's see what happens when I click the random button. This is Intersection by Karen McCadden, who was Karen on the Rattlecast? I believe she was. Yes, she was. Right? I think so. I think she was on like episode 60 or something. And this is her poem Intersection from Rattle number 32. So I'll just read this one and then we'll close out the show. This is Intersection. At the four-way stop, I wave you on, a kindness. You wave, no, you go. I wave, go. We keep on. You insist. Me. No, you, please. A bird shifts, a sigh. The penned horse tosses, pacing. I mouth, you go. There is a fleck on your windshield. I notice your hands. Rain falls. Your hands cup the wheel at 10 o'clock and 2, then float past my knee and only sometimes land. 100 times on my back, they tame me. Cars line up. Birds lift. I nod my head into your chest. There is a trail of clothing. I walk to the plank door of your room. This takes hours and hours. This is a small cottage, and there is sand on the floor and nothing on the walls, crows calling, dishes in the sink. Days go by. We are still making our way to the bed. This is an inventory. Black telephone, board games, frayed chairs, coffee tables spotted with the old moons of drinks, curtains pulled back on tiny hooks, single-pane glass, windows like the ones I used to sneak out of at night, lifting them as slow as the stepping. And when you talk into my neck, the words settle in the hammock of my collarbone, puddle there and spill, slide over my breasts, and I am slowly covered and rinsed. I do not close my eyes. Nothing hurts. The dust rises and swirls. Dogs bark. You turn your windshield wipers on intermittent. Your car rolls into the space I have built between us. I am up to my belly in a northern lake, cold. I am afraid now. When I get home, everyone will see. That is Karen McCadden's poem, Intersection, a great poem from Rattle number 32. And let's finish up with a Sciku for this week. And the Sciku is based on this story, which, hang on one second, here we go. So this is from a popular news article. A lot of times I find just literature from different scientific journals, but this is something in the popular news. This is from Newsweek reporting. Astronomers find 70 rogue exoplanets wandering the Milky Way in a breakthrough discovery. And what's fascinating about this is just that it seems like there should be planets everywhere. If you considering the way stars form, There should be stars like Jupiter that don't acquire enough mass to ignite like stars do. But the problem is that you can't really see them because they're not emitting any light, right? So we have no idea how many there are. And this team of astronomers this week announced their findings, looking back through all the data over the last 30 years, finding these very faint planets that are still slightly warm from the process of congealing. And so they could find infrared signatures of these planets here. And so they found 70 of them, but there are probably billions just in the Milky Way. More rogue planets wandering lonely and cold in space than stars in the galaxy by an orders of magnitude. And I just think imagine what it must be like to be on a planet like that, or a moon around a planet like that, with no light from the sun, maybe some, a little bit of warmth from but activity from the ground itself, and that's about it. But there could be life there too. So anyway, this is the Sciku, inspired by that article. Holidays around a starless planet, one moon. Holidays around a starless planet, one moon. That is your Sciku for today, and that is your show today. It was an excellent episode, I thought, with José A. Alcántara, with the Bitten World as our main guest, and then great poems and the open lines, and excellent poem to start off the show too. So thanks to everybody for joining me. It's always a pleasure. I just love doing these shows. I wouldn't miss one for the world. Next week's prompt is going to be another theme-based prompt, more topical kind of theme. Write a poem about a moment of 2021 you'll never forget. So it's a look back at 2021. Is there a moment in 2021 you'll never forget? It's that time of year, at the end of the year, and this is a kind of, like last week, I noticed a lot of submissions about the solstice in Poets Respond submissions this week. Another time you could sort of do double duty if you want, and submit for Poets Respond and make it a prompt poem for this week too. So that's the prompt. Write a poem about a moment of 2021 you'll never forget. And next week's guest is going to be Amanda Newell. Amanda is the author, as you probably know if you're a subscriber to Rattle, of this winter's chapbook, I Will Pass Even to Acheron. And just a wonderful chapbook about a student of hers who lost a leg in the war and came back, and her experience with that, and the way that we're all participating in this warlike society. And I Will Pass Even to Acheron. It's just a wonderful poem, or a wonderful book. Amanda Newell is the poet. She also has another book forthcoming. This will be out next year, I think, so she'll probably be reading those poems as well. But if you read the chapbook and want to ask Amanda any questions, and have your questions prepared, and we'll talk to Amanda Newell on Rattlecast number 125, Sunday, January 2nd. And I have a typo in there. It should say January, not Janary. So I'll have to fix that. But that is Amanda Newell, Rattlecast 125, Sunday, January 2nd, the regular time, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great rest of your Sunday, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.